Chapter 284, Greenwood Realm. I say, little Ewer, you can't favor one and discriminate against the rest. We're partners that just fought side by side. You gave this guy something to eat, so can't you give me something to eat too? We've not eaten for quite a while, so quickly give me some roast chicken too. This time it was Ju Yangan's turn to facepalm and shake his head. He never would have thought that his young master could also be so shameless. Hashi felt her head started to pound due to these noisy guys. Hence, she took out several roast chickens that she had prepared long ago from her space and threw one to each person. Finally, the surroundings quieted down, leaving only the muffled noise of chicken being chewed. When it was Nangong Yu's turn to catch a roast chicken, he moved closer to Hashi and looked at her with resentment on his face. I want an assorted cake, shark fin soup cooked over purple sand, dragon and phoenix golden nest. Obviously, before it had only been him who was able to eat the dishes made by a leavener, yet now this group of brats had managed to taste it. Nangong Yu was unwilling to accept it. Extremely unwilling. Seeing them all eating with looks of enjoyment, he was really itching to squish their stupid faces into a mud pit. A corner of Hashi's mouth twitched as she retrieved her hand that was about to give him the roast chicken. It's up to you whether you want to eat it or not, I don't care. This guy actually dared to order food. Did he think of her as a cook? Nangong Yu quickly grabbed the roast chicken from her hand and, taking advantage of the situation, her embraced her waist and whispered in her ear, I said before that you're not allowed to make food for others to eat, as a leavener's taste only belongs to me, Hashi responded by kicking him away with distaste. After lunch, they took a moment to take a break and reorganize before preparing to continue on their journey. According to the map on the jade slip that Nangong Yu had previously obtained, they were currently located in the Greenwood Realm, in the inner layer of the sealed dragon domain. There were no treasures that people would fight over in the Greenwood Realm, only many fierce demonic beasts that were roaming around. Therefore, not many martial artists would specifically go out of their way to come here. However, according to Wu Yu's exploration, there was a medicinal field located in the Greenwood Realm where Zijin's master had grown his lifetime collection of spiritual herbs. Originally, the medicinal field had a strong rate of herb survival, and after 1,000 years of growth, the plants inside must be very precious. Nangong Yu knew that Hashi's medical skill was superb and that she was very interested in collecting uncommon spiritual plants. Since Jiyu Liufeng and the others didn't have anything they particularly wanted to do, they decided to proceed towards the medicinal field. In fact, the thing Hashi most wanted to find at this moment was the key to gain control over the secret territory. Unfortunately, she had had no idea that each layer of the secret territory was so dangerous, and anyway, if they wanted to leave the Greenwood Realm, they needed to find the formation, location, which couldn't be done within a short amount of time. Hence, she could only give up. Moreover, there would certainly be many precious spiritual plants to be found in Zijin Master's medicinal field, and she wanted to take the opportunity to see if she could find the divine dragon fruit that the little dragon needed. If she could, then that would be great. Suddenly, she recalled something that the little dragon had said about the Burning Heaven Realm. Greenwood Realm, Burning Heaven Realm. Did this mean that the Burning Heaven Realm might also be part of the sealed dragon domain? The more she thought about it, the more likely she figured that she was correct. She was now starting to become a little impatient about gaining control of the secret territory. Greenwood Realm wasn't large, so in merely half a day they had managed to spot the location of the medicinal field and found that it was enveloped by a white fog. The reason there was a fog was that this area could be considered the most sought-after location in the entire Greenwood Realm. The white fog should be covering Zijin Master's medicinal field where he had planted the spiritual plants, but examining it from the outside, the scene inside was indistinct and they were completely unable to see anything clearly. There were at least a dozen martial artists surrounding the white fog. Most of them were only Meridian stage, but there were also a few gold core stage martial artists. All of them were gazing towards the fog with a grave expression, an excited and anxious aura surrounding them. When Hashi and her group approached, they all turned around and glared at them, many of their faces morphing into a grave and dreadful expression. 1. Formation, divided into battle formations and spell formations, although they are often just called formations. Battle formations are tactical formations used by several cultivators or martial artists attacking in concert. Spell formations are also called arrays. They're essentially magic circles which cast a continuous area of effect spell on the location the formation encompasses. Chapter 285. The Murong family. Many people wouldn't recognize His Highness Hell King, but still, Wu Yu had quickly made him a disguise so that no one would know his true identity just in case. But even though Hell King was disguised, an imposing aura was still being released from Hush's group, particularly from Qing Long and Wu Yu. The two of them hadn't bothered to conceal their cultivation base at all, and with them both being at the peak of Gold Core stage, it caused the groups surrounding the fog to shrink back in alarm. A martial artist in the early ranks of Gold Core stage came forward and warily sized them up. You also want to enter the medicinal field? Wu Yu indifferently responded, if so, then what? I'll give you a bit of advice, you had better leave this place immediately. The martial artist then lifted his head and arrogantly said, let me tell you the truth, this medicinal field has been claimed by our Murong family. You can enter if you want, but you'll have to pay 80% of whatever you earn from the medicinal field to us. Before Wu Yu could reply, he saw Jiyu Liufeng, who had been silently listening to this the whole time, suddenly take a step forward and sneer as he said, if we don't agree. Don't agree? The martial artist burst into loud laughter. Do you think that just because your cultivation base is high that you can take whatever you want from this medicinal field? I'll tell you now that in here, even if your cultivation base high, you still can't overturn the wind and the waves. Even if you're a dragon on the outside, once you're in our Murong family's territory you have to be obedient. Murong family? Jiyu Liufeng slowly stressed the word. The head of the Murong family belongs to one of Yangjing City's 4 great clans. Don't tell me you don't know this. Arrogance flitted across the Gold Core stage martial artist's face and he looked at Jiyu Liufeng in contempt. If you don't abide by Greenwood Realm's rules, even if you leave, my Murong family will never let you go. So if you're tactful you should either get lost, or you'll obediently do what we tell you to do. That martial artist hadn't yet finished speaking when a fierce red light shot from Jiyu Liufeng's hand. Uttering a shrill scream as he flew back several feet, the martial artist then smashed heavily to the ground. His eyes opened wide as they filled with disbelief. On his chest, there was a still ablaze wound that spread him open from chest to abdomen. You. Blood continuously flowed from his mouth and his face was a terrifying sight, filled with obstinacy. Ultimately, he was unable to finish what he was saying before he stopped breathing. All the martial artists who were watching this had the same frightened expression on their faces due to Jiyu Liufeng's ruthlessness, whether they were Murong family subordinates or a few of the Nayland family subordinates. While on the contrary, the group of people from Hush's side were completely unmoved regarding Jiyu Liufeng's abrupt violence. To them, it was as if what he had killed was nothing more but an insignificant ant. Instead, the rather gossipy Wu Yu leaned towards Jiyu Liufeng and whispered, "Oh, do you hate the Murong family?" Jiyu Liufeng calmly retrieved his long sword, an indolent smile hanging on a corner of his mouth. "They're nothing but a group of dressed-up pigs that are unpleasant to the eyes. It's best to slaughter them when you see them. What hatred are you talking about?" Hearing that, Wu Yu let out a fit of laughter and didn't bother trying to pry further into Jiyu Liufeng's privacy. Rather, he pointed at a martial artist beside the white fog and demanded, "You, come here." That person was a middle-rank Meridian stage martial artist. After just witnessing Jiyu Liufeng's ruthlessness, his face instantly turned white when he was called over and he wished he could dig a hole to hide himself in. Don't call me. I'm not from the Murong family. I was staying here in the hopes that I could take advantage of any trouble that might occur." Wu Yu sneered, "Just come here when I tell you to. Talk any more nonsense and I'll rip your tongue out of your mouth to be a snack that'll accompany a glass of wine." The Meridian stage martial artist was scared witless and began shaking all over. Frantically rushing forwards, he dropped to his knees before Wu Yu's feet, trembling as he kowtowed to beg for mercy. Chapter 286. The White Fog's absorption of spiritual power. Wu Yu crossed his arms in front of his chest as he asked, "Tell me, what's with this strange white fog? Why did that useless trash from the Murong family say that even if someone's cultivation base is high, they still couldn't overturn the wind and the waves? How could a low-level martial artist ever dare to conceal the truth?" Hurriedly, he replied, Senior, please spare me my little life. I'll tell you everything that I know. I don't know what formations are inside the fog, but, no matter how high a person's cultivation base is, when they enter that white fog, their spiritual power will quickly start to drain away. Moreover, any methods you might have to control your spiritual power will become ineffective once inside. Even if it were a martial artist of nascent soul stage, they would also become an ordinary person without any cultivation base. A person's spiritual power will quickly drain away. Wu Yu stroked his chin while frowning, then he said, "Do you know what happens to the ones who go inside?" The martial artist's face now looked somewhat frightened as he shook his head. "We went in for a while and found that the road ahead was endless and obscured. When we realized that the spiritual power within our bodies was draining at high speed, we escaped out of fear. This humble one had 2 companions with him who didn't believe in evil. They went in, but the Jade Life tablets they left with this humble one shattered. If a Jade Life tablet were to shatter, then that would mean that the martial artist who owned it had died." Wiping away the perspiration on his forehead, the martial artist continued in a trembling voice, "Once this humble one left the white fog, this humble one discovered that after a full 2 hours my spiritual power restored itself. Unfortunately, during that period this humble one's strength was lacking more 50% of its usual power. Due to that, this humble one nearly lost his life to all the martial artists who had surrounded the white fog hoping to collect any small advantage. If it were not for this humble one handing over several treasures, this humble one would have long been on the journey to the underworld." Wu Yu frowned as he turned to look at Nangong Yu and Hushi. The white fog could absorb all of a martial artist's spiritual power. This issue was indeed troublesome. Since the medicinal field was inside the white fog, it was unknown whether any of the martial artists who had previously entered had met with an ambush or if after they had left the medicinal field, with their spiritual powers wholly depleted, they just couldn't resist an attack. It would have been like slaughtering fish in a barrel. Wu Yu glanced at a few of the gold core stage martial artists standing nearby. Other than glaring towards Hush's group, none of them blindly attacked. Satisfied with how they were now acting, he said, "So now you stay here in the hopes that when someone comes out from inside, you can take advantage of their powerlessness to loot them? Didn't the Murong family take control of this area? They still allow you all to take advantage here?" Trembling, the low-rank martial artist broke out into a cold sweat before hanging his head and saying, "What the Murong family want is some of the rare spiritual plants inside the medicinal field. In particular, they seem to be looking for a 7th-grade spiritual herb known as the mythical heart herb. The Murong family will thoroughly search every person that exits the white fog, and then those that remain and are deemed unnecessary by them are then left for us to search and divide between us." Wu Yu had nothing more to ask, so he waved his hand and allowed the martial artist to return to where he'd previously been standing. Then, turning towards Nangong Yu, he said, "Master, the risk of entering the white fog is too big. It's better to let me and Qing Long go to the medicinal field while you and young Master Shi wait outside." "Out of the question," Hushi immediately vetoed. "You wouldn't be able to recognize any of the medicinal herbs, and you also don't know to pick them safely. I want to go to the medicinal field by myself. You can wait outside." What a joke. Her space was the best place to transplant the medicinal herbs. If there were any precious spiritual plants in the medicinal field, she would of course straight away move them into her space to ensure their survival. If she didn't go in herself, the damage to the herbs would be too significant. Upon hearing that, Nangong Yu's face instantly darkened. You should just drop the matter. I said before that I'd never let you leave me. Not to mention, letting you go to such a dangerous place alone is impossible." Chapter 287, Tied Together Forever. Qing Long and Wu Yu were alarmed, quickly moving to prevent Nangong Yu from risking himself. "Master, your identity is rather extraordinary. If you were to lose your cultivation base and people knew it, then the consequences would be unthinkable. If you're worried about young Master Shi's safety, then Wu Yu and I can accompany him. We swear we won't let young Master Shi suffer any injuries." A corner of Jiyu Liufeng's mouth perked up, while a charming smile flowed within his eyes. "It's also okay if you don't go. I'll accompany little Yua." With me partnered with little Yua, what difficulties won't we sweep away? What do you think about it, little Yua, am I right? With a languid appearance, he leaned over to put his arm over Hush's shoulder. Qinglong and Wu Yu's eyes widened. This good-for-nothing, even at a time like this he still dared to provoke Nangong Yu. Sure enough, a glint of coldness appeared in Nangong Yu's eyes, and an invisible beam of spiritual energy shot forth. With a swish, it instantly pulled Hushi to his side. Following that, Jiyu Liufeng cried out in shock from the sudden action. Jumping away, electricity had now scorched the long hair that had previously hung in front of his face into a bundle of smoking ends. This resulted in him cutting a sorry figure. Nangong Yu glared at him coldly, slowly stressing, "It'll never be necessary for you to protect my people. I will never allow Elevener to leave me." Even more, he would never allow Elevener to be alone with this bastard. Master. Qinglong and Wu Yu were full of anxiety, but they just couldn't persuade Nangong Yu to stay. Having no other alternative, they threw pleading looks towards Hushi. Hushi held her forehead. She would like nothing more than to get rid of these annoying people and just go in herself, but, seeing Nangong Yu's persistent gaze and Jiyu Liufeng's smiling eyes, forget it, she had better things to do and didn't want to waste any effort. Hushi's gaze fell on the white fog. With a hint of doubt flashing within her eyes, she couldn't hold back and reached out her hand to touch it. There didn't seem to be any unusual feeling or spiritual power absorption. It appeared that she needed to be inside to experience it personally. In the end, how did this white fog absorb a person's spiritual power? "Don't be so noisy," Hushi muttered. "I'm curious about this white fog that absorbs spiritual power. I'll go in first to take a look, while you all stay to discuss who will go and who will stay." Nangong Yu instantly responded, "I'll go with you. I'm just going in to take a look, not heading towards the medicinal field. I don't need anyone to accompany me." Hushi looked up and saw Nangong Yu's persistently stubbornly expression, so she helplessly said, "Or you can take your golden silk and tie it around me, will that do?" Hushi had said this as a joke, but who would have thought that when Nangong Yu heard it, his eyes lit up and he immediately took out the golden silk. A moment later, Hushi watched as the golden silk was tied between her right hand and Nangong Yu's left hand, causing a corner of her mouth to twitch. Nangong Yu then leaned closer to her ear and whispered, "Elevener, I really want to tie you like this to me forever." Hushi turned around and stormed into the white fog without the slightest hesitation. She refused to look at this shameless guy. After barely entering, Hushi felt an immense force suctioning out her spiritual power within the white fog. Her complexion turned pale, while from a distance she could just hear someone's shrieks. "Let me out. Let me leave this damned fog. I no longer want any treasure, just let me leave." The white fog was not only able to absorb a person's spiritual power, but it was also able to make fear bloom within a person's heart and confuse their mind, resulting in them becoming lost within the white fog. Along with this, after their spiritual power was utterly drained, the martial artist would then find that their vitality would start to drain away. So for most people who went into the white fog, they would find themselves unable to come out, but still unable to reach the medicinal field. Unfortunately, this would end with them losing their lives within the white fog. Chapter 288. Barely satisfactory. After a moment of silence, Hushi's expression regained its tranquility. For her, although her cultivation base was significant, it wasn't her only way to save a person's life. She still had poison, Qinggong, and her internal power. If there was anyone who dared to rush over and provoke her, she wasn't afraid to fix that person's appearance. As Hushi's heart calmed down, she began to sense the spiritual power in her body gradually draining away, as if an external force was pulling and pushing her dantian to make it release her spiritual power. However, the spiritual power that was released didn't form any fluctuations in the surroundings, as the white fog immediately absorbed it. Hushi tried burning the white fog but found that the spiritual fire was barely released from her body before it disappeared without a trace. As time went on, more and more spiritual power drained from her body, and once it reached almost 80%, her complexion was nearly deathly white. But suddenly, she opened her eyes, and within them, a trace of understanding was visible while a confident smile graced her lips. Outside the white fog, Nangong Yu's hand tightly gripped the golden silk. His outward expression was calm, but his clenched fist exposed his nervousness. Abruptly, his eyes lit up and gazing towards the white fog, he saw a slender silhouette slowly moving closer. With facial features as bright as sunlight within the white fog, her appearance resembled the most enchanting fairies of the demon beast forest. This image firmly lodged itself in his heart, and he found that he was no longer able to free himself. As soon as Hashi exited the white fog, she immediately swallowed a spiritual supplement pill that was made with spirit spring water and began to meditate to regulate her spiritual power. She had already discovered a way to deal with the white fog, but first, she needed to restore her spiritual power and then she would go in to try again. The spiritual supplement pill had barely entered Hashi's body before she suddenly felt tranquil spiritual power suffuse her body from her back. Slowly entering her body, that spiritual power carried with it a familiar warmth and gentleness. It was Nangong Yu. He was using his spiritual power to assist her body in absorbing the spiritual supplement pill and accelerate its effects. Hashi closed her eyes and obediently accepted Nangong Yu's spiritual power. Gradually, her dried-up dantian filled, and a corner of her mouth stretched into a faint smile. Half an hour later, Hashi stood up and said, "I want to enter the white fog again." With that, not waiting for everyone's reaction, she took out a few silver needles and inserted them into several of her acupuncture points. Then, she turned and entered the white fog without hesitation. This time, Hashi only stayed in for a quarter of an hour. However, after she came out, her complexion was rosy, and her smile even reached her eyes. Unlike before, she didn't appear weak and pale due to the loss of spiritual power. Wu Yu and the others were confused at first, but once they realized what had happened, they stared at her with wide eyes. "Young Master Shi, you found a way to suppress the loss of spiritual power?" Hashi nodded and took her pulse. Then, with regret evident in her voice, she said, "I've found a way to suppress the loss of spiritual power, but that can only prevent the loss to about 80%. Moreover, this kind of method is normally only used to strengthen a person. In an environment such as the white fog, attacking is absolutely impossible. In the end, figuring out a way within such a short time left me with barely satisfactory result." "This is still barely satisfactory? You're not satisfied? How do you let other people live if these are your standards?" Wu Yu glanced at Qinglong, his face full of shock and admiration. This princess of his was too awesome. None of the gold core stage or nascent soul stage martial artists had been able to do anything about the white fog, but their princess's hands had effortlessly brushed it aside. TSK, she really was a woman worthy of his abnormal master's fancy. Hashi lifted her head to look at everyone. "To be sure, it's best if someone amongst you all goes in and tries it out." She wanted to test it out just in case there was someone with a slightly unusual constitution. If she were unable to seal their acupuncture points, then that would be troublesome. Chapter 289. I'll go wherever you go. Qinglong quickly stepped forward. "Young Master Shi, let this subordinate try it." Hashi nodded her head and stuck several needles into his body without hesitation. The amount of time that Qinglong stayed in was rather long, so it was about half an hour before he rejoined them. The moment that he came out of the white fog, the ordinarily calm Qinglong now had a face full of smiles as he walked up to Hashi and said respectfully, "Young Master Shi, your medical knowledge has really reached perfection. To be able to suppress the loss of spiritual power by sealing acupuncture points, one would first have to have a deep understanding and confidence in the human body and meridian structure." It was also at this moment that Qinglong was utterly convinced. If they were to ever find a cure to Nangong Yu's cold illness in Mi Luo continent, it would be in their princess's hands. Hashi's brows furrowed. "Although this method can solve a part of the problem, I feel that the dangers in the medicinal field will be far more than this. Furthermore, I don't know how much land the white fog covers. If we were to stay in it for a few hours and were unable to come out, then it's very likely that sealing off our acupuncture points wouldn't be able to prevent the draining of spiritual power. You better clearly think about whether or not you want to take the risk of going in with me." These people were locally born and bred cultivators who were public figures. For them to be without spiritual power would be equal to them having their hands and feet broken, which would be far too dangerous. As for herself, Spiritual power had never been the only way to protect herself. In a crisis, she just didn't care about how much spiritual power she lost. However, before Hashi could finish speaking, Nangongyu lightly tapped her nose and unhappily said, "Little girl without conscience, I've said it so many times before, but you still want to leave me behind. I said previously that I'd go wherever you go, so don't ever think of abandoning me." Since Nangongyu wanted to go in, of course, Wu Yu and Qinglong would follow him. After all, compared to these useless people who were attempting to rob treasures on the outside, there were likely to be more dangers in the medicinal field. While Jiyu Liufeng, on the other hand, gave a smug look. "I said before that I wanted to go on an adventure together with little Yua," he laughingly said, completely ignoring the sharp glare that Nangongyu was throwing him. In the end, only Zhu Yangan and several of the bodyguards from Hell King Manor remained outside the white fog. Their cultivation bases weren't high, so Qinglong made them hide far away to wait for more orders once they left the white fog. When Hashi saw how many people were determined to enter the medicinal field with her, she no longer tried to persuade them and instead fished out a bottle of medicinal pills and handed them to everyone. This is a kind of medicinal pill that can increase a martial artist's strength and speed in a short period. The medicine is relatively mild, and the effect isn't too excessive. If an ordinary martial artist were to take this, they could withstand a level 3 or 4 Qi refining stage martial artist at most, but the advantage is the duration time. Moreover, it has no side effects on the body. These medicines had initially been prepared to help Shi Jiao and the others while they were training. When Hashi had refined them, she'd kept a few bottles in her space, but she'd never expected there would be a time when they would come in handy. The people surrounding Hashi each held a pill with an amazed expression, not doubting her words in the slightest. During this time, Hashi had utterly subdued them all with her incredible medical skills. Even Jiyu Liufeng swallowed the pill without hesitation. When the effect of the medicinal pill was felt within his body, shock covered his face. As he gazed at Hashi, his eyes gleamed with a brilliant light. Outside the white fog, several martial artists were watching as they hid in the distance. When they saw that Nangongyu and the others were entering and exiting the white fog several times, before finally entering the white fog and disappearing from their sight, they couldn't help but exclaim in shock. "They're really entering the white fog. Aren't they afraid that they'll be unable to come out and will be completely lost in there?" Chapter 290. A hell-like world. When they were going in and out of the white fog before, could it be that it was to find a secret method? How could there be a secret method? When they entered the white fog, they didn't have any spiritual power fluctuation. This was a clear sign that their spiritual power is being absorbed by the white fog. Humph, this group of idiots. It must be because their cultivation bases are so profound that they're able to get through the white fog. In that case, we just have to wait here to profit from them. But those people's cultivation bases were so high and their methods were so vicious. What if by chance their cultivation bases are high so that without their cultivation bases they only end up like ordinary people? At that time, the more treasures they have, the greater the benefits we can get. Humph, daring to oppose my Murong family. I'll let that stinky brat who wore a mask know what happens to those who offend my Murong family. Inside the white fog, there was a bone-chilling aura. Without spiritual power, a cultivation base, and having your physical strength drained away little by little, this was a hell-like world. However, this was more terrible compared to gradually moving towards a possible death, as hidden within the dense fog, the sounds of a massacre could suddenly be heard all around. Spare me. I beg you, spare me. I'll give you all of my treasures. Wretched screams and begging echoed throughout the thick fog. However, the only response that was given was the rough and excited laughter of men. Sparing your life just gets us treasure, but if we kill you, then the treasures and your woman are all ours. You tell us, if it was you, what would you choose? The figures of 7 to 8 sturdy and tall men with their faces covered with a black cloth surrounded a small group of people. The lead man's eyes were slanted at an angle as he looked at the young girl with lewd and greedy intentions. We're disciples of the Red Cloud sect of the Tiangang Kingdom. If you dare lay your hands on us, my sect master will never let you off. However, that masked man laughed and said, The Red Cloud sect won't let us off. That depends on whether or not you can escape from here. As long as you silently die here and your bodies rot away leaving only bones, no one will ever discover your presence. Being surrounded, the 5 martial artists' faces showed horrified and desperate expressions. Within this white fog, their spiritual power had utterly disappeared, and their weak bodies were even more susceptible to attacks than an ordinary person's. These vulgar men before them had cultivation bases that were merely in the early ranks of Meridian stage. Outside the white fog, they wouldn't even be good enough to carry the shoes of a Red Cloud sect's disciple. But now, they had the nerve to try and kill them. The masked leader burst into loud laughter and waved his hand as he said, "Brothers, except for that beautiful young lady, smash the rest of their heads in for me using giant hammers." As his words fell, several men rushed forward shouting strangely, the noise similar to the sound a swarm of hornets make leaving their nest. Every one of them held a gigantic weapon in their hand. Some were holding giant hammers, some were holding large swords, and there was even one who held a huge and heavy axe. These heavy weapons were simply unable to be held up by ordinary people, however, in the men's hands they were like swaying toys. In just a short moment, 4 young martial artists had their bodies effortlessly smashed, a blood-curdling screech piercing the silence as they fell to the ground. The terrifying part though was that one person was split open from head to toe by the large axe, causing his internal organs and blood to spew to the ground. This scene was extremely bloody and terrifying. The young girl was the only one who remained, and she released a horrified shriek, her voice full of fear and despair. The masked leader was covered in sweat as he stepped forward and pulled at the girl, forcing her to stand up. Then, he maniacally laughed as he said, "Brothers, do you see her? Such a soft and tender-skinned young girl with a cultivation base at the peak of Meridian stage. I'm sure in her large sect she's the cream of the crop. Have you ever tasted such a delicacy before?" Chapter 291. This group of animals. Everyone roared with laughter and jeered in unison. "After eldest brother finishes having fun with her, it'll be our turn." The girl struggled with all her might to escape from the man's large hands, simultaneously letting out a heart-rending screech, "You're all animals. Animals. If you dare touch me, my master and daddy will never let you go. Kill me if you have the ability." The masked man yelled as he groped her chest, laughing with a lecherous expression. "Kill you? Such a beautiful girl, how could we be willing to kill you?" The force of his grip increased and a tearing sound could be heard as the girl's clothes were instantly torn to shreds, revealing her soft skin and red undergarments. Indeed, this is an item of the highest quality. Saliva pooled in the men's mouths and their eyes gleamed with fiery lust. "Eldest brother, what are you waiting for? Quickly fuck this girl." With the fog being so thick and heavy, it's a natural barrier from prying eyes. The masked leader's eyes were also shining as he turned to his brother behind him, and said, "Show who, hold this girl's feet for me, don't let her move." After his words, he immediately pinned the girl to the ground as if she was an animal. The girl's miserable and desperate shrieks echoed incessantly throughout the thick fog, however, her resounding scream was unanswered. Furthermore, even if someone did hear it, what could they do? Everyone in this thick fog was rendered powerless, so who could come and save her? In the blink of an eye, the masked man had completely stripped off the girl's clothes. Sho who couldn't help but loudly swallow his saliva as he held the girl down, an impatient expression on his face. All of a sudden, Sho who felt something cold touch his neck that caused a sharp twinge. He couldn't help but reach out his hand to touch his neck, yet unexpectedly, his line of sight abruptly changed and flipped completely upside down. Sho who opened his eyes wide with shock and stared helplessly at his now headless body. He then watched as it incessantly spewed forth a tremendous amount of blood that splashed across the girl's body, as well as the boss's. Arg! Amongst the robust men standing around in a circle and watching, the cowardly ones uttered screams of terror. The masked leader, who was soaked in blood, finally returned to his senses and suddenly jumped up, gripping his large axe as he shouted, "Who are you that you dared to launch a sneak attack on us? Quickly reveal yourself." As his words fell, he saw a vague silhouette slowly moving within the white fog. It was a youngster who looked to be about 16 to 17 years old. He had snow-white skin, striking features, and bright red lips that were slightly pursed, like a red plum flower that had softly fallen onto the snow in winter. As he gradually appeared, the dense fog swept across his face, slicking back the jet-black strands of his satin-like hair and causing it to gently stick to his slender and fair neck. Following the gorgeous arc of his neck, it gracefully extended downwards to an exquisite collarbone, prompting wild and fanciful thoughts. The masked leader gulped. He could clearly see that the person before his eyes was a man, yet he still couldn't help but feel his throat tighten, his breathing deepen, and the stirring in his genitals that had vanished due to the blood just a moment ago, was now back and throbbing more vigorously than before. Oh shit. This was apparently a young man, however. To think that he was actually more seductive than the young lady from the Red Cloud sec. Stinky brat, you must have guts if you want to be a hero and rescue a beauty. Or do you want to replace that young lady and have fun with us brothers instead? The youngster ignored him and laughed, a corner of his mouth lifting into a stunning curve before he suddenly waved his right hand. A purple shadow flew like a lightning bolt towards the man who spoke. Before he could react, that purple shadow abruptly wrapped around his neck and dragged him forwards like a dead fish. Chapter 292, Helping Others. When everyone could finally see what it was, they saw that the purple shadow was actually a vine. Moreover, it was emitting a frightening amount of spiritual pressure. Who did you want to have fun with? The youngster's voice echoed in their ears. It was a clear and melodious voice which was pleasant to listen to, but when it reached their ears, it was like hearing an evil spirit from the underworld. The man hanging from the vine opened his eyes wide and wanted to beg for mercy, but before he could utter a word, a crack resounded in his ears as his neck was instantly snapped and he lost his life. A corner of the youngster's mouth curled up into a cruel smile. As for the rest of you, who else wants to have fun with me? The very youngster before them now was Hushi. Not long after she'd entered the white fog, she was separated from Nangong Yu and the others. As for the reason of their separation, Hashi had noticed that the purple vine in her hand was restless. After entering the white fog, Hashi discovered that the white fog did more than merely injure a martial artist than just absorbing their spiritual power. Within the white fog, there was a hard-to-detect aura of ice-cold spiritual power. It entered a martial artist's meridians little by little, gradually slowing their movements. If they had a spiritual power supplement, it wouldn't really matter, but because spiritual power couldn't be used within the white fog, they could only purely rely on physical strength to resist the cold. Since everyone's physical strength decreased extremely fast, in just a short period their complexions had all become somewhat pale. Only Nangong Yu and Hashi didn't seem to be affected by the white fog. It was at this time that Hashi was surprised to discover that Nangong Yu had a dual soul cultivation base. Although he still couldn't use spiritual power, the cold air within the dense fog was nothing to him. While Hashi, on the other hand, wasn't affected because of the plant spirit pet that she'd just taken in. Though Hashi would never have guessed that the draining effect the white fog had towards spiritual power would be utterly ineffective towards the purple abyss vine. Not long after entering the white fog, the purple abyss vine had quietly left her space to explore, full of happiness and joy as it occasionally absorbed the spiritual power within the white fog. This caused Hashi to feel comfortably warm without a trace of coldness. However, what Hashi didn't expect was that after the purple abyss vine had absorbed an enormous amount of spiritual power from the white fog, it unexpectedly had a small advancement. This transformation affected the white fog and unfortunately caused a whirlpool to form inside the fog. But because the purple abyss vine was her spirit pet, she was directly involved and was drawn into the whirlpool too. As soon as she awoke, she found herself alone. When Hashi recalled being swept up into the whirlpool, she remembered Nangong Yu's frightened and sorrowful expression, as well as his trembling shouts. Her heart couldn't help but slightly tighten. That guy, he was really worried about her. Hashi returned from her train of thought about Nangong Yu and swept her icy gaze over the masked men, before ultimately settling them on the undressed girl. The clothes on the girl's body had long been torn to reveal her delicate skin, but sadly, it also showed the ghastly bruises and cuts that covered her. The girl's expression had been blank, as if she'd reached an extreme level of fear and desperation. It wasn't until her gaze had locked with Hushi's that she'd finally realized that she was saved, and it was then that she'd broken down into loud sobs. At that moment, she'd really thought that she was ruined. Even if she hadn't died today, her life would have still been the same as a dead person's. However, at such a critical moment, this godlike youngster had appeared like a hero with a bright cloud beneath his feet, rescuing her from hell. Hush's eyes widened, and her cold gaze traveled back towards the few masked who were still panicking. Originally, I wasn't interested in meddling in other people's business, but who told you all to commit such a disgusting act? You're all worse than pigs. You're fortunate for running into me today, since this young master occasionally likes to help others. After all, what harm is there in helping others once in a while? Chapter 293, Blood Refining Body Cultivator. Damn bastard, who do you think you are? How dare you meddle in our business? At that moment, the masked leader finally returned to his senses. When he took a closer look at Hush's frail figure, exquisite face, pure white skin, and body without any spiritual power fluctuations, he immediately sneered without the fear that he'd had a moment ago. You're only relying on a spiritual weapon that doesn't require spiritual power, yet you want to take advantage of us? Dream on. Haven't I told you yet? I'm a blood-refining body cultivator, not an ordinary spiritual cultivation martial artist. Even if you use a magical weapon, don't think that you can survive under my hand. Upon saying that, the bodies of the masked men suddenly exploded with a severe amount of pressure that rivaled Mount Tai, and their entire bodies began to be enveloped in orange light. Upon saying that, the bodies of the masked men suddenly exploded with a severe amount of pressure that rivaled Mount Tai, and their entire bodies began to be enveloped in orange light. In this world, most martial artists chose the road of spiritual cultivation. However, there were also a few who had poor qualifications and eventually decided to refine their bodies instead. Refining the body was 100 times more painful than spiritual cultivation, and the majority didn't survive the training. In the end, they could only die like an ordinary person. Therefore, exceptions such as Nangong Yu's were abnormal. Being able to achieve a dual soul cultivation base was near impossible. The ranks of refining the body were divided into a total of honing the tendons, refining the blood, cleansing bone marrow, tempering the bones, casting off a mortal body and being reborn, and becoming an immortal. Don't think that a blood-refining body cultivator was weak because if they wanted to advance, they didn't have to train hard for decades. Once they broke through the first rank, a blood-refining body cultivator would be on an equal level regarding the strength of a high-rank foundation establishment stage martial artist. The moment Hashi noticed their bodies emitting an orange light, she was momentarily curious yet amazed. Of course, she wasn't afraid of their strength. Instead, she was thinking about the differences between the methods of training for refining the body and the methods of training she gave to Shi Jiao and the others. Although Shi Jiao and the others were now rapidly improving, there was still no better way for them to advance. If she could combine her training methods with the blood-refining body cultivation method, wouldn't it help them to reach a new whole level? Seeing the surprise on Hush's face, the masked leader couldn't help but be supremely proud of himself. So lifting up his large axe, he rushed forth as he shouted, "I'll let you have a taste of my big axe." With a loud boom, the white fog surged forth and completely enveloped the two people fighting, blocking them from view. However, while the remaining few strong men had full confidence in their boss, they couldn't help but loudly tease, "Boss, remember to keep that little rabbit alive. We don't mind playing with him, even if he is a little boy. Boss, even if you chop off his hands and feet, spare that beautiful face of his. Adding it to our loot collection would be good too." Ha ha ha. The men's cruel and rough laughter made the girl on the ground curl up into a ball and tremble violently, tears of desperation streaming down her cheeks. If that youngster died, her fate would be incredibly miserable. What's more, that youngster, to save her would. Suddenly, the girl blankly stared ahead with wide eyes. She'd noticed that the initially thick fog was now slowly dispersing, allowing a rhythmic thumping to be heard before that too ultimately stopped when the fog cleared. The next moment, she saw a youngster dressed in pure white robes unhurriedly walking towards them. Twisted around his right hand, there was a purple-colored vine, while in his left hand, he was carrying a human head. Although the human head was dripping blood, The youngster's clothes weren't stained at all, as if he was a spotless white fairy untainted by the dirt of the world. At the same time, he seemed like an aloof god that looked down on everyone. Chapter 294. The Eye of the Array? The Core of the Array. The girl suddenly covered her mouth and uttered a muffled sound of joy, while tears continuously rolled down her cheeks like a strand of pearls with its string snapped. While the group of strong men who had previously been excited and were jeering non-stop, simultaneously showed horrified expressions. Staggering back several steps, they were unwilling to believe that their powerful boss had been slaughtered. However, once they squinted to scrutinize the head, they recognized the familiar face. His facial features were twisted grotesquely, his eyes were wide open, and the black cloth covering his face had disappeared, revealing an expression of utter horror and despair. Spare our lives. Some of the men dropped to their knees, kowtowing to beg for mercy, while others screamed and tensed to flee into the thick fog. The purple vine in Hashi's hand flashed as it suddenly sprang forward. In the next second, it was like a sword as it pierced the backs of those who wanted to run away. Blood trickled down the leaves of the vine to drip unseen to the ground layered with white fog, and in a heartbeat, the air was permeated with the thick stench of blood. Although, when Hashi retrieved the vine, the purple leaves were already clean and fresh, you couldn't even see a trace of the blood. The purple abyss vine swayed in delight, expressing its happiness and desire to continue consuming blood. Hashi immediately rejected the purple abyss vine's wish to kill and eat in the white fog, and put the unwilling vine back into her space. She then slowly walked towards the only strong man who remained alive. The strong man currently had a blank look in his eyes as he trembled and stared at the corpses of his companions. Due to the trembling, his teeth were chattering together, and in the next moment, there was an overwhelming stench of urine as a wet patch spread between his legs. "Please have mercy, young master, spare my life. I beg of you, please spare my life, I won't dare do anything. I wouldn't dare." Hush's towering figure looked down at him as she coldly asked, "Tell me, how long have you been in this white fog and how many martial artists have you robbed?" How could that man dare to conceal the truth? He quickly kowtowed and said, answering young master, We were the first ones to enter this white fog, it's been 6 days. In the beginning, we didn't know that this white fog could completely absorb a martial artist's spiritual power, we just wanted to profit from the medicinal field. But, later, when we discovered that those spiritual cultivation martial artists who usually think so highly of themselves would become useless and helpless in the white fog, we came up with the plan of robbing them. The man raised his head and looked at Hashi, only to find her eyes focusing on him. "Continue, say what you know." Yes. This small one absolutely wouldn't dare conceal anything. The man was so frightened that his trembling grew more violent before he quickly continued, "Normally us body refining cultivators are bullied and humiliated by spiritual cultivators, yet now we had an opportunity to take revenge. Moreover, this white fog is very strange. After we explored deeper we couldn't find the way out, also, we couldn't find a way to enter the medicinal field. Therefore, we all figured that we might as well wait around here and focus on robbing the martial artists whose spiritual powers were drained." Hashi furrowed her brows. "There's no way to enter the medicinal field. We didn't find it, however, we met a group of extremely powerful martial artists. Although they didn't have any spiritual power, the imposing aura being emitted from their bodies was immense. We didn't dare approach them and instead, we quietly ran away. But, I remember hearing them talking about wanting to enter the medicinal field and that to do so, they had to find the eye of the array, or the core of the array, or something. The eye of the array? The core of the array." The wrinkle between Hush's beautiful eyebrows deepened. As she'd expected, this white fog was a natural array. Chapter 295. Major Cloud Array. Since she'd read the ancient records left by Old Man Shumi, she had some understanding about arrays, but at most, it could only be regarded as minimal. So if she wanted to break the array, it was simply impossible. The strong man noticed that Hashi was lost in thought and completely unguarded. His hands that were by his sides slowly moved towards his chest pocket. He knew that this youngster before him would never let him go, so this being the case, he might as well strike first and try to gain an advantage. He abruptly took out a tube which stored poisonous needles and fiercely aimed one at the youngster's heart. With a quiet swoosh, a needle flickering with green light flew directly towards Hush's chest. A vicious light gleamed within the man's eyes, and he couldn't help but shout as he stood up, "Bastard, go die." Yet before he could finish his curse, his eyes opened wide in horror. What he saw was that the needle surrounded by flickering green light was unexpectedly caught between Hush's slender and fair fingers. Then, before he could react, the needle suddenly flew back towards him, straight towards his left eye. Ah! The man uttered a pained scream as he covered his left eye and tumbled to the ground. He wanted to howl in anguish and beg for mercy, but before he could say a word, his eye that had been pierced by the needle began to rot while a white foam mixed with blood filled his mouth. There was so much that it started to overflow and he had to keep spitting it out. After a moment, he stopped breathing. Hushi was too lazy to even glance at him and turned to leave. The young girl who'd initially been curled up on her side with a frightened look on her face suddenly returned to her senses and shouted, young master, please stop." Hushi stopped and somewhat impatiently looked at her. The girl had a delicate and pretty face, a petite figure, a well-proportioned build, and she appeared to be about 17 to 18 years old. Unfortunately, she couldn't stop trembling as she tried to cover herself with the pile of rags that she clutched. She looked absolutely pitiful. The girl shivered under Hush's cold gaze, but nonetheless, she held back the fear and shame bubbling within her heart to lower her head and quietly say, "Young master, many thanks for your kindness. Can you please tell me your name? I will certainly repay you in the future." "No need," Hushi indifferently replied. "I didn't mean to save you. They were just unpleasant to look at, nothing more." A trace of disappointment flashed within the girl's eyes, but it was quickly replaced with even more gratitude. "No matter how it happened, if you hadn't saved me, I really don't know. My name is Shinchingchua, and I'm a disciple of the Red Cloud sect. Young master, if you have anything that requires my help in the future, please don't hesitate to find me at the Red Cloud sect. I'll certainly go to any length to repay young master's favor." The girl had initially wanted to use a jade tablet or talisman for help, but in this white fog, she couldn't open her storage ring. This made her heart feel upset and ashamed. Hushi nodded her head to indicate that she understood, then turned around to leave once more. Seeing his back as he turned around, Shinchingchua bit her lower lip and suddenly said, "Young master, do you want to enter the medicinal field?" I know the way to enter it." Hushi stopped in her tracks, her gaze not as cold as it was before as she looked back at the girl. Shinchingchua's cheeks reddened, and she slightly lowered her eyelashes. Then, she softly said, I heard my sect elder say that Zijin Master's medicinal field is known as the 100 Herb Mist, and that the array inside is the powerful Major Cloud Array. There are a total of 2 sections to the array, the core, and the 64-part eye. Only one of them is in this white fog though. If you want to break the Major Cloud Array, you need to find the array eye and cut off its energy supply. With that, the array core will shortly appear as a portal door. That portal door is the gateway to the medicinal field. Chapter 296. We will definitely meet again. I just have to find this core of the array. Shinchingchua tilted her head to the side in thought for a moment, then said, "Actually, there is a way. That is, a way to destroy all 64 parts of the array eye in a short period, causing the array to briefly cease functioning. Although this period of time will only be for a few short breaths, if you're prepared to enter the medicinal field, then it's still possible. But, wanting to find the 64 parts of the array eye within a short time is practically impossible because once the time runs out, the destroyed parts of the array will be automatically restored. Moreover, the force the fog uses to absorb spiritual power will dramatically increase." Hushi looked pensive as she said, "I understand, thank you for telling me this." Having said that, Hushi withdrew a set of clothes from her space and gave them to Shinchingchua, before she indifferently said, "This should be enough to repay you for your information. It's dangerous inside this white fog, so you should hurry up and leave." This time she didn't stop and quickly disappeared into the thick fog. Left alone, The girl quickly dressed in the clothes that had been handed to her. Lifting up one of the sleeves to the tip of her nose, she smelled the scent of fresh medicinal herbs and a faint blush covered both of her cheeks. "We'll meet again, right? We will definitely meet again." Hush's figure disappeared into the fog, and to ensure that no one was around, she immediately summoned the purple abyss vine from her space. As the purple abyss vine came into contact with the white fog, it promptly began swaying excitedly. It then started transmitting its excitement and cravings to Hushi through her divine sense. However, Hushi didn't dare let it do as it pleased and refused to allow it to absorb more spiritual power. If it were to cause another whirlpool within the white fog, or directly touch the array, then she would be in big trouble. After appeasing the purple abyss vine and promising to give it some spiritual fire for it to eat when they entered the medicinal field, the purple abyss vine reluctantly calmed down. Hushi flicked her hands, and in a split second, several hundred purple shadows flew out, all of them instantly shooting in all directions of the white fog. This was the purple abyss vine's unique technique of dividing its body into thousands of vines, and it was the quickest way to search for the core and the eye of the array in this boundless white fog. Each of the purple abyss vine's subvines was connected to Hushi's divine sense. Unfortunately, this meant that each subvine was dramatically weakened compared to its usual strength, rendering it unable to attack. It also meant that if it was attacked, the damage would be relatively severe, and most of it would be inflicted on Hushi's divine sense. Soon, in as long as it takes to burn a stick of incense, and Hushi's complexion was becoming a little pale, the purple vine wrapped around her wrist began excitedly bouncing around. It was like it was eagerly trying to tell her about something. Finally, Hushi opened her eyes to reveal a sharp glint of purple swirling within their depths. In a split second, all of the purple abyss vine's subvines returned to Hushi's body as fast as sharp arrows. Excellent, she had found all 64 parts of the array's eye. Unfortunately, she couldn't find the core of the array, which would have made everything a lot easier. After all, the core of the array was the array's lifeline and foundation, so no matter what kind of array it was, they were typically concealed well to prevent it from being destroyed. It was normal that the purple abyss vine couldn't find it. However, with the exact location of the 64 parts of the array's eye, it wouldn't be too complicated for her to destroy it within a short time. A corner of Hushi's mouth stretched into a faint smile, and with a light tap of her foot, she disappeared from where she stood. The location of the first part of the array's eye was nearby, so Hushi arrived beside it very quickly. The white fog surrounding the part of the array's eye was apparently a lot thicker than other areas, which made the draining of spiritual power extremely powerful. Hushi's eyes focused, and the main part of the purple abyss vine sprang out, heading towards the center of the array's eye without any hesitation. Before her, there was only a thick layer of fog, but she still heard a crash echo around her, as if something had broken. Chapter 297, Black-Clothed Man. Next, the white fog started surging around her, like a huge rock thrown into a tranquil lake. The first part of array's eye had been eliminated. Hushi tapped her foot again, and at lightning speed, she proceeded towards the second part of the array's eye. The location of the second part of the array's eye was more remote than the first's. As soon as Hushi neared it, she couldn't help but shudder. Even though it was already cold in the white fog, this area seemed to be several times colder. Moreover, even though the white fog was thick, you could still see about 3 meters ahead. However, the white fog here was so thick that there was nearly zero visibility. Hushi wiped at the water vapor gathering on her face, feeling the bitingly cold air seeping into her bones. At this moment, her hair and clothes were wet, and to withstand the cold air, she had no other choice but to use her internal energy. With her powerful internal energy, she was now able to tolerate the cold environment. Hushi no longer hesitated, and the purple abyss vine sprung out from her hand in a flash. With a crash, the second part of the array's eye was broken within the white fog without mishap. Due to this, the rolling of the white fog became more violent, and its absorption of spiritual power increased to the point that it made all of Hushi's meridians tremble. She didn't dare stay any longer, so she turned around to leave. However, just as she was about to use her qinggong, her expression suddenly changed. Then, like a shadow, Her figure jumped back a few steps. The thick fog in front of her still made everything hard to discern, but she could vaguely see a tall silhouette slowly approaching her. Just as Hashi was filled with bewilderment, she heard the deep voice of a man that was filled with murderous intent. "Who let you touch a part of the array's eye?" Hashi was momentarily shocked. This person also knew about the array's eye? Her brow furrowed, yet she didn't answer the man and instead raised her foot, moving to flee like a bird. "You want to escape?" The man's voice was cold as he snorted in contempt. Hashi had barely jumped into the air before an invisible force wrapped around her ankle, dragging her back. This time, an alarmed expression finally revealed itself on Hashi's face. Hashi waved her right hand without hesitation, and a purple shadow shot towards the figure within the thick fog. The purple vine trembled and waved in the air as it absorbed the spiritual power within the white fog, its momentum gradually increasing. Just as it was about to fly towards the man, it twisted itself up like a small storm, signaling its intent to shred the man to pieces by whistling through the air. However, a scene of the man being ripped into pieces didn't happen as Hashi expected. Instead, she heard the man make an exclamation of surprise in a puzzled tone before he then grabbed the purple abyss vine with one hand. After he tugged on it a few times, it was left entirely immobilized. Hashi was shocked once again, but before she could react, she felt an immense force grab her, and she abruptly tumbled forwards. With a thump, she harshly made contact with something, causing her to feel faint and her vision to blur. Her nose filled with the white fog's cold atmosphere mixed with the robust and unfamiliar scent of a man. "You're just a low-level martial artist, yet you're able to control the purple abyss vine, haha." A deep, dark, and husky voice sounded above her head. Obviously, it was only a soft laugh, but it made a person's blood run cold when they heard it. "Speak, who told you about the location of the array?" Hashi raised her head and saw a handsome face before her, with features as sharp as a blade. The man looked to be about 24 to 25 years old, and he was dressed entirely in black. His features were undoubtedly handsome, but a callous aura surrounded his appearance. It was as if a cold and murderous spirit had crawled out of the depths of the underworld. Chapter 298, Immortal Silk. Hashi struggled and found that without her realizing, thread as thin as a strand of hair had wrapped around her body. The other end of the thread was gripped in the man's hand, and at this moment, she was just like a fish on a chopping board with no way to escape. If it were an ordinary person who was facing such a situation, he likely would be frightened and panic. However, what kind of person was Hashi? When she'd carried out missions in the past, she'd encountered all sorts of dangers, and had fought many different types of drug lords. A corner of her mouth stretched into a sneer before a beautiful, yet cold voice unhurriedly left her bright red lips. "Such a joke. If you can find the parts of the array's eye, why can't I? Was this major cloud array created by your family? In the end, you're nothing more than a useless person who was trapped in this array and was unable to come out." The man was astonished when he heard her remark. Growing up until now, he had never encountered anyone who dared speak to him like this. After a long while, he quietly chuckled, but that laugh didn't reach his eyes. Instead, his glare was cold. "Excellent, your cultivation base isn't high, yet your courage isn't small. Since you caught death yourself, then I'd like to help you accomplish it. After I cripple your cultivation base, I'll use the soul search technique to get the information from you. The result is the same for you either way." As his words fell, a sharp light flashed from his hand and suddenly flew towards Hashi's heart. However, in the next moment, a shocked expression appeared on the man's face. He watched as Hashi, who was supposed to be restricted by the immortal silk and unable to budge, suddenly bent down and at a moment of life or death, avoid a fatal blow. Following that, the immortal silk restraining Hashi like glue abruptly lit up. Turning a charred color and withering away, it then fell to the ground as ash. The trace of a sneer showed on a corner of Hashi's mouth, and the purple abyss vine in her hand flew straight towards the man without any hesitation. The man was stunned and caught off guard, so he was directly hit on the chest by the purple abyss vine with a snap. If he hadn't reacted in time and quickly stepped back, Perhaps his heart would have been directly hit by the purple abyss vine. But despite dodging, his upper clothes had now been shredded, exposing his bare chest, perfect skin tone, and the smooth lines of his six-pack. The man bowed his head to examine his torn clothes and the bloody cut on his chest in disbelief. He couldn't believe that he was injured by such a puny low-level martial artist. Hashi didn't look pleased though. This man before her, compared to her, had more experience and a higher cultivation base. Even if he couldn't use spiritual power within the major cloud array, Hashi didn't believe for a second that if he attacked another way that she would be able to escape again. With this thought in mind, Hashi no longer hesitated and the purple vine in her hand spun rapidly, causing the surrounding white fog to surge uncontrollably as it flew towards Hashi. In just a moment, the white fog looked like it was going to swallow her. However, in the blink of an eye, it was entirely absorbed by the purple abyss vine in her hand. The purple vine which had absorbed the white fog kept trembling and rubbing its leaves against each other, making a rustling sound as if it was telling Hashi that it wanted to drink blood. As more than half of the white fog was absorbed, the surroundings began to lighten. Yet suddenly it fluctuated, and soon after became denser. Within the white fog, the black-clothed man's face expressed clear shock. As he looked at Hashi and the flickering purple vine in her hand, his expression abruptly changed to one of understanding and excitement. Chapter 299, Escape Without a Trace. After building up enough force, Hashi's attack made a whistling sound as it launched through the air. Following the whistling, the purple vine abruptly transformed mid-air into many shadows, like 1,000 arrows all shooting straight towards the man. The man's eyes gleamed with a hint of admiration, but then a corner of his mouth curled up. The next second his big hand flipped over and a flag of blue so dark it seemed black suddenly appeared in his palm. There was no apparent spiritual power being emitted from the flag due to the white fog, but there was a chillingly cold aura surrounding it that could make anyone terrified. With a wave of the flag, every single purple vine was suddenly absorbed inside of it, all of them swallowed up silently and cleanly. The man lightly laughed and went to look at the youngster, but then his expression swiftly froze. There was no trace of the youngster anywhere within the thick white fog. As it turns out, the moment the purple abyss vine had attacked, he'd taken the opportunity to disappear completely. He escaped. He actually dared to escape. A sharp light sparked within the man's eyes. You think you can run away from me? In this world, no matter what he wanted, people or things, they could never get away from his grasp. As soon as the words left his lips, the man's figure disappeared, leaving only the churning white fog to indicate that something was amiss with the major cloud array. The moment Hashi had released the purple abyss vine, she'd used her Qinggong to escape far away. Although she was proud, she wasn't arrogant. That black-clothed man had clearly come prepared since he could use a high-level spiritual weapon without spiritual power. Coupled with the disparity in their experience, he wasn't a person she could currently win against. Hashi had initially wanted to destroy the next part of the array's eye, but she was afraid of once again being caught by that crazy black-clothed man. So hesitating for a moment, she pondered over what should she do now instead. After thinking it over for a moment, she once more released the purple abyss vine's subvines, deciding to use it to find Nangong Yu and the others. With help from Nangong Yu, Jiyu Liufeng, and the others, she didn't believe that there was no way to destroy all 64 parts of the array's eye. However, just as she released the purple abyss vine's subvines, Hush's complexion promptly changed. As the purple vines shot out like shadows, they unexpectedly made a loud bang. When she was able to see what had occurred clearly, she noticed that they'd blocked a powerful attack. Hashi had an ashen complexion as she looked at the black-clothed man who'd appeared not far away, and coldly said, "You followed me like the spirit of a deceased person. In the end, what do you want?" The fog where Hashi was now standing wasn't as thick as it was before, so the black-clothed man could finally see the youngster's features clearly. Long eyelashes curled upwards, soft and snowy skin, beautiful lips, and long black hair that was dampened by the fog stuck to his cheeks. With such a pure appearance and brightly shining obsidian eyes, he had a countenance that could easily capture anyone's soul. Unexpectedly, It was a stunning youngster who could topple the world with just his looks. He appeared to be about 15 to 16 years old, a child who just entered adulthood but not yet 20. It turns out that it was only a tender youngster who'd forced him to such lengths, even causing him to bring out the black banner. The coldness in the black-clothed man's eyes transformed into excitement, and crossing his arms in front of his chest he arrogantly said, "I can allow you to live, however, you have to become one of my people and obey my words. If you do, I can promise you that as long as you help me to destroy this major cloud array, in the future, you'll gain benefits that you never would have imagined having in this lifetime." Hushi looked at him with a "you're crazy" look, then sneered as she said, "There must be something wrong with your brain, or were you born mentally handicapped? Why should I help you break the major cloud array? Even going so far as to make me be one of your people and obey your words? You deserve this based on what?" "Good. Very good." The black-clothed man's eyes suddenly flashed dangerously as a murderous aura condensed within them. "It seems that I'll have to let you experience several defeats before you are obedient." Chapter 300. Collaborate. After he spoke, the black flag suddenly flew out and enveloped the two figures, like a cloud covering the sun. There were no apparent spiritual power fluctuations, but the densely cold aura it emitted caused Hushi to be alarmed. She felt like she was being pressured by Mount Tai and found herself unable to breathe. While this was occurring, the black-clothed man smirked and approached Hushi. As he got closer, the black flag suddenly transformed into a black shadow and also headed towards Hushi. The purple abyss vine rapidly responded by springing out to fight with the black shadow. Following that, a dark golden blade appeared in the black-clothed man's hand and shot towards Hushi. A loud bang echoed through the white fog, causing it to start violently churning. When the white fog finally settled down, you could see one black ray of light and one purple ray of light intertwined. As the light had become like two ropes, they had tightly bound Hushi together with the man. Both of their complexions were a little ashen, while Hushi's hand was clenched around a green dagger that was firmly pressed against the man's neck. Though on the other side, a golden blade was gripped within the black-clothed man's hand as it firmly pressed against Hushi's chest, as if in the blink of an eye it would pierce her heart. However, shock and amazement showed on the black-clothed man's face. His hand holding the golden blade trembled as he was unsure whether to withdraw or not. He looked at the elegant youngster with shining eyes in bewilderment, taking quite a while before saying, You're a man." A coldness flashed in Hush's eyes, and the dagger suddenly cut into the skin on the man's neck as she coldly said, "This dagger is smeared with the highly deadly blood-sealing throat poison. Although it's useless against a high-level martial artist, in this white fog you're unable to use spiritual power, and due to this, you won't be able to expel the poison immediately. If you still insist on harassing me, I don't mind if neither of us wins." Feeling an itchy pain from the wound on his neck, the black-clothed man's expression became sterner and a trace of anger showed on his face. "If you refuse to cooperate, do you really think that I don't have ways to deal with you?" After a brief pause, he coldly said, "If you hadn't rashly destroyed a part of the array's eye, which changed the direction of the 8-track trigrams, I would have already found the array's core and destroyed the major cloud array. Now that you've ruined my plan, shouldn't you pay the price? How about you help me break the array?" Hushi was startled for a moment, while on the contrary, the only thing revealed on her face was a slight trace of hesitation. If this man really could find the array's core, it would save her the time of breaking every part of the array's eye. Looking down, she saw that both of their bodies were tightly joined together, and in a heavy tone said, "Make your black flag release us first." The man slightly lowered his head and smelt the fresh fragrance of medicinal herbs being emitted from her body, so pursing his lips, he said, "Your purple abyss vine still restrains me too." Hushi furrowed her brows. "I'll count to 3, and then we'll release each other at the same time." In a flash, the purple abyss vine and the black flag simultaneously retreated and flicked into the air. The purple abyss vine turned into purple light and returned into Hushi's body, while the black flag returned to the man's palm. Hushi quickly stepped back to make space between them and silently took a deep breath, using this opportunity to restore her depleted internal energy. On the other side, The man felt the sudden loss of warmth within his arms and missed the subtle fragrance tickling the tip of his nose. He was somewhat disappointed at the loss for a moment. He looked up at Hashi, and the cold tone within his voice was mixed with a slight gentleness. To get rid of the major cloud array, it's necessary to find the array's core and cut off its energy supply. Just destroying one or two of the array's eyes is useless. I have a way to find the array's core, however, there is a strong spiritual power barrier surrounding the array's core. As I can't use the technique within the white fog, wanting to break through the barrier uses a large amount of effort. But, if we were to use your purple abyss vine, it would be different. Chapter 301, Enemy on a Narrow Road. Hashi was shocked, but just as she was about to ask him how to find the array's core, her gaze suddenly focused on something in the distance. Almost at the same time, a happy voice traveled from within the white fog. Big brother, so as it turns out, you're here. We've finally found you. When Hashi heard this voice, the look on her face abruptly changed and a murderous glint appeared in her eyes. That was the voice of Feng Lianying. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 figures materialized one after another from the white fog to appear in front of her. In addition to Feng Lianying, who had a look of pleasant surprise on her face, walking beside her was Nai Jinchen and some disciples of the Liu Li sect. Most of these disciples were at the peak of Meridian stage, but there were also a few low-leveled gold core stage martial artists. Besides Feng Lianying and Nai Jinchen, amongst the people with them, there was also one other person that Hashi recognized. It was the third prince, Shangguan Rui, and his 2 gold core stage personal bodyguards that she'd met at the entrance of Hell King Manor. Hashi's face became very unsightly. She hadn't expected that the black-clothed man would actually be Feng Lianying's older brother. Not only that, but dealing with an enemy on a narrow road, in the midst of this white fog, she had unexpectedly bumped into this vicious white lotus, Feng Lianying. Sure enough, Feng Lianying's attention was so focused on the black-clothed man that she hadn't seen Hashi yet. But, as soon as she turned her head, her beautiful eyes couldn't help but widen before she instantly uttered a scream filled with anger and resentment. Slut? Why are you here? Hashi's hand clenched tightly around a vine of the purple abyss vine, while cold sweat seeped out of her palms. Although, on the surface, her face was expressionless as she sneeringly said, "Who is the slut that's calling someone a slut?" "Of course the slut is calling," Feng Lianying started saying before she realized what she'd said and stopped. She couldn't help but snarl as she took out her flying sword to stab at Hashi. But she'd forgotten that in this white fog she was unable to use spiritual power, rendering the flying sword just like an ordinary long sword. On top of that, she was just like a useless person without enough strength to even truss a chicken. Feng Lianying had only just managed to feebly thrust the flying sword forward before Hashi stopped it, and then without hesitation, lift her foot to fiercely kicked Feng Lianying's stomach. Feng Lianying screamed as she flew back like a kite with an abruptly snapped string before she then crashed down hard to the ground. With a deathly pale complexion, she covered her stomach and started to incessantly howl in pain. When Nai Jinchen saw that Feng Lianying was seriously injured, he was startled and filled with heartache. Quickly approaching her, he helped support her to sit up, and then stuffed a medicinal pill into her mouth. "Little sister Lianying, are you all right?" Feng Lianying clutched his wrist with her nails deeply embedding themselves into his flesh, and with a slightly hysterical voice said, "Kill him, kill that slut for me. I'll grind his bones into dust and scatter the powder." Okay. Little sister Lianying, rest assured, I will definitely take revenge for you." With that, Nai Jinchen suddenly stood up and bellowed towards the disciples of the Liu Li sect behind him, "Kill that stinky brat and dismember his body for me. Whoever ends up killing him, I will inform the clan head and recommend that they are allowed to become an inner sect disciple." After having said that, a green disc instantly appeared in his hand. At first, the disc didn't seem to be anything remarkable. Yet, when Nai Jinchen bit the tip of his tongue and allowed the blood to drip onto the disc, it suddenly lit up with a dazzlingly bright green light. The weapon that had initially lacked spiritual power fluctuations instantly absorbed a part of the spiritual power within the white fog and began to emit an intense aura. The elegant yet frail-looking teenager stood alone in the white fog, and with the purple-colored vine in his hand shuddering slightly, a corner of his mouth curled up to form a stubborn sneer. Chapter 302, Big Brother. As 10 or so martial artists rushed towards her, Hushi was like a lone wolf being surrounded by a group of beasts. It was clear that in the next moment she would be torn to shreds, yet she didn't cower or show any signs of fear. The disc in Nijintian's hand flew directly towards Hushi as he leapt into the air while roaring, "Go die!" The disc gave him a brief burst of spiritual power, giving him the confidence to feel that he could dismember this vile bastard's body that had wounded his little sister Lian Ying. But immediately after yelling, a scene occurred that shocked him to the core. The moment that disc arrived before Hushi, it abruptly started trembling. Following that, a purple-colored shadow wrapped around it until it formed a ball. That purple shadow was, of course, a purple-colored vine and a fifth-ranked devil plant, the purple abyss vine. The purple abyss vine had been like an excited puppy as it dashed towards the disc, and in a short time, tightly wrapped its vines around it. Then, like a big mouth, the disc was swallowed whole. A crunching noise, similar to that of a chewing sound, came from the purple vine and mixed with a rustling sound caused by the purple vine swaying in excitement. In the deathly quiet fog, these sounds echoed in the surroundings and were particularly frightening. You. Nijintian clutched his chest, which was in pain, and pointed to Hushi, asking with a trembling voice, "How can you use spiritual power within the white fog?" A smirk appeared in a corner of Hushi's mouth, and the purple vine in her hand suddenly transformed into a whip. Next, the whip fiercely slashed at the closest disciple of the Liu Li sect. That person was merely at the meridian stage, so being hit by the purple abyss vine's whip caused him to immediately wail in pain and fall to the ground, a bloody and gruesome wound visible on his body. Watching as Feng Lianying, the person who had bullied her in the secret territory, now trembled on the ground with blood flowing from a corner of her mouth, Hushi felt pleased in her heart. It seemed that this white fog wasn't entirely lacking in benefit. When Feng Lianying met Hushi's disdain-filled eyes, she was no longer able to bear it. So standing up, she at first staggered before she then rushed towards the black-clothed man, brokenly weeping, "Big brother, you must help me take revenge." The black-clothed man frowned, his expression gloomy and cold as he slowly asked, "You know him?" Feng Lianying's body was on the verge of collapsing as she gave him a sad and heartbroken look, and said in a trembling voice, "Big brother, that bastard is Shi Yu. He cheated me and robbed me of my Zijin Palace inheritance. He also provoked the relationship between our Liu Li sect and Brother Yu. Obviously, he's a man, but he shamelessly seduced Brother Yu. Big brother, quickly kill that bastard for me." The eyes of the black-clothed man suddenly filled with frost. As his gaze fell on Hushi, he slowly stepped forward as he asked, "You seduced Nangong Yu?" Feng Lianying felt delighted in her heart. However, the expression on her face showed even more sadness and distress. "Big brother, the injuries to my body were caused by him. He also joined with Jiyu Liufeng of Shengde Hall to speak rudely to us of the Liu Li sect. They said that even though we were from the Feng family, we still wouldn't enter their eyes. I'm so angry it's unbearable and want to teach him a lesson. Who would have thought that Brother Yu, who has always loved me dearly, would be bewitched by such a bastard and wholeheartedly protect him? Such a lowly person who doesn't know shamelessness and is a vicious bastard like him. I will never allow him to live in this world. Big brother, please kill him for me." Nijintian, who was standing to the side, quickly echoed what Feng Lianying had said with, "Young master, I personally saw Jiyu Liufeng injure little sister Lianying. At that time, Nangong Yu not only didn't help little sister Lianying, but he instead protected this loathsome brat. You must help seek justice for little sister Lianying." Chapter 303, Leave Nangong Yu. Even though it was a matter that had nothing to do with himself, Shangguan Rui couldn't help but interrupt as he stood off to the side. "I've seen this boy in Hell King Manor before. The servants there all treat him extremely respectfully. It may be assumed that his relationship with Hell King must be exceptionally intimate." Hearing Shangguan Rui's words, Feng Lianying grit her teeth out of jealousy. But when she turned her head and saw the black-clothed man's gloomy look, A delighted smile couldn't help but spread across her face. Big Brother had also hoped that the Feng family could be connected by marriage to Hell King Manor, yet now this loathsome brat had inserted himself between her and Nangongyu, destroying their relationship with Hell King Manor. How could Big Brother not be angry? Even though she didn't know what trick that brat had used, it was clear that in this white fog, these people weren't his match. The only one who could kill him was her big brother, Feng Yunjing. That's right, the black-clothed man in front of her was the young master of the Feng family. Kangming Kingdom's most powerful and feared man of the Feng family, Feng Yunjing. Although the Liu Li sect was one of the 4 major sects in the Mi Luo continent, in actuality, it was all because of the influence of the Feng family. In the Liu Li sect, Feng Lianying was capable of stirring up all sorts of trouble, and yet she could still be called the young head of the sect. But compared to her big brother, Feng Yunjing, in regards to terms of privilege or strength, it was like comparing clouds to mud. From a child until now, Feng Lianying had been afraid of this half-brother. Except for Nangongyu, she had never seen a man as fearful and powerful as her big brother. Therefore, as long as her big brother was willing to help her, killing this bastard would be as simple as crushing an ant. Feng Yunjing's face was gloomy and cold, leaving his thoughts utterly unreadable as he slowly walked towards Hushi. Hushi's expression was also no longer as willful as before, but instead grave as she tightly clenched the purple vine in her hand. Feng Yunjing didn't make any moves to attack her. Instead, he slowly walked to stand in front of Hushi, then darkly said, "She you, is it? Perhaps I can give you an opportunity to not die." With a brief pause, he then suddenly took a step forward, closing the distance between the two of them before he arrogantly said, "As long as you vow to leave Nangongyu and never see him again, as well as helping me to break the major cloud array, I'll let you go." How does that sound? A corner of Hushi's mouth faintly curled upwards. "I can." Delight flashed deeply within Feng Yunjing's eyes without him realizing. However, he heard Hushi abruptly raise her voice while laughing lightly. "Of course, that's as long as you personally kill the people who offended me, who also happen to be in front of me." Her gaze fell upon Feng Lianying, and the smile on her mouth became more devilish. "As long as you personally kill Feng Lianying and Nai Jinchen, I will help you to break the major cloud array." "You say, how is it? You bastard." After hearing the conversation between the pair, Feng Lianying screamed, and regardless of everything, she rushed towards Hushi. "Bastard, I want you to die. You better die. Go die. Go die." However, Feng Lianying had barely rushed towards Hushi before she was restrained by Feng Yunjing, leaving her completely unable to move even a simple step. Feng Lianying was shocked and raised her head to stare at her big brother, then she hysterically screamed, "Feng Yunjing, even you are seduced by him? Such a shameless man. In the end, what's so good about him? Aren't you afraid that if Daddy knows?" Hey. The sounds of a slap echoed in their ears, and Feng Lianying was thrown to the ground by Feng Yunjing's hit. Lifting her head, she met with her big brother's dark and cold eyes, causing her to tremble all over. An unspeakable fear surged within her heart, draining her complexion to a deathly pale. "Big brother, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. I said that out of anger." Feng Lianying's heart was full of fear, to the extent that her voice was trembling and making her words hard to understand. Chapter 304. Pray. Feng Yunjing didn't look at her, rather, he looked towards Hushi and coldly said, "You have no option regarding this matter. Either you never see Nangongyu again and help me break the array, or, if I don't agree." Feng Yunjing's face sank, and he suddenly reached out his hand to grip Hushi's chin, forcing her to look up as he faintly sneered, "Did you use this face to bewitch Nangongyu? I see that it's indeed a feast for the eyes, but if Nangongyu were to know that you'd become one of my people, I wonder whether he would still want you or not." A dash. Feng Yunjing suddenly released Hushi's chin, his face ashen as he stepped backwards. Then, slowly reaching out his hand, he gently touched his earlobe. His hand unexpectedly felt something cold and damp, before he realized it was blood. A gleam of killing intent flashed within Hushi's eyes, and the purple vine suddenly sprang out from behind her. Like a curtain that covered the sky, it erected a terrifying barrier behind her. There may be another option, and that is, you all die. Her voice was laced with bone-chilling anger and humiliation, which made her jade-white face appear bright red like a peach blossom. This unexpectedly increased her beauty, to the point that she could easily hook a person's soul. A glint flashed across Feng Yunjing's eyes, and the smile on his face was dark and overbearing with the hint of his aggressive nature, indicating his thrill to a challenge. Very good. Never before has prey managed to escape from my hands. Shi, I'd like to see whether or not you can accomplish it. A blackish-blue flag sword, entangling itself with the purple vine and making it clear that they were evenly matched. A long sword appeared in Hush's hand, and from the tip of the sword, countless shadow swords erupted that enveloped Feng Yunjing. Such an exquisite sword technique was like an illusion that utilized one's full strength to carry it out. Obviously, there were no spiritual power fluctuations, but it was like a gorgeous dance, beautiful and magnificent. Momentarily the sky actually changed, with clouds and mist covering the sun. Feng Yunjing moved to avoid the sword's attack, as a touch of shock and admiration flashed within his eyes. Suddenly, his body emitted a red light, while a dark rumble echoed in the sky and rang in Hush's ears. It's a pity, but if I were to let you continue advancing in this white fog, there's the possibility that not even I would be able to stop you. At this very moment, you are doomed to become my prey, Shi. As his words fell, the red light suddenly intensified, like blood condensing, before it then swept towards Hushi. The blazing atmosphere caused Hushi's steps to falter, and an amazed expression appeared on her face. There was obviously no spiritual power in the atmosphere, but when it touched her body, it was unexpectedly able to thoroughly absorb her physical energy. In just a moment, Hushi couldn't even lift her sword, and it fell to the ground with a clang. Her complexion became deathly pale, and her feet staggered as if she was about to fall. A corner of Feng Yunjing's mouth curled into a callous smile, and he extended one of his long arms to pull her into his embrace. Yet who would have thought that the moment he reached out his hand, he would be surprised? Feng Yunjing's figure rapidly retreated, but he was unable to avoid the full force of the sword wrapped in a murderous aura. This resulted in the cloth on his sleeve being torn, and a ghastly cut to appear on his arm. Hush's body became limp, yet instead of falling to the ground, she fell into a warm embrace. A familiar scent assailed her nostrils. It was like she had finally reached a safe harbor, a place she had been longing for with great expectations. Unaware of why, Hushi felt her nose itch as she softly called out a single name, Nangongyu. Nangongyu suddenly released her to grab her shoulders, examining every inch of her for injuries. The palms that touched her body were scalding hot, and at this moment, they were shaking slightly, showing how frightened the owner of the hands was. Chapter 305. If it's unreasonable this king indulges him. Nangongyu, I'm all right. My power is just depleted, that's all. Momentarily, Hushi was unsure whether to laugh or cry. In front of so many people, in the end, until when was this guy going to continue touching her? In response to her, however, Nangongyu gathered her into his arms and tightly embraced her. 11er. Fortunately you're all right. Fortunately, I found you, 11er. Hushi felt extreme pain, like her bones were being crushed. This man was acting like he wanted to fuse her to himself, making her unable to breathe. But deep in her heart, there flowed a warmth that she couldn't precisely pinpoint, making her restless, angry, and lonely heart of a moment ago become calm. It wasn't until a good while later that Nangongyu finally loosened his hold on Hushi, then turned towards Feng Yunjing. Feng Yunjing's eyes narrowed slightly, a cold and dangerous light gleaming within them. His gaze fell on Nangongyu's hands, one of which was firmly wrapped around the youngster's slender waist, while the other was helping to tidy up the youngster's hair now and then. It also regularly drifted down to stroke his warm and tender cheek, as if confirming his existence. The youngster, who was still confronting him with bared fangs like a fierce little beast a moment ago, was now nestled in Nangongyu's arms, looking utterly adorable and docile. The two people standing together and cuddling seemed like a pair of jade annulus made in heaven, both male and female as beautiful as a painting. So beautiful, it was unpleasant to the eye. Before Feng Yunjing had a chance to say anything, Feng Lianying's voice was heard sobbing behind him. Brother Yu, why do you only care about whether or not young master she was injured? I was ambushed by him just a moment ago, and until now, my stomach is still in a lot of pain. Aren't you concerned about me even a little bit? In your heart, do our feelings for each other, over so many years, not even compare with this treacherous boy? Hushi raised her eyebrows, and she couldn't help but step backwards from the hands that were looped around her body. Yes, she had just beaten up Feng Lianying. Moreover, after she'd finished beating her up, until now, she'd felt very pleased. She would like to see how Nangongyu would react when he saw that his beloved little sister Lianying had sustained an injury, and what's more, it was caused by her. Seeing her wanting to get away from him, Nangongyu's face sank. Suddenly, he reached out his hands to pull her back, firmly imprisoning her in his arms. His ice-cold eyes landed on Feng Lianying, and slowly speaking with a calm tone, he said, 'Elevenor is one of this king's people. Anything that he does, if it's justified, this king lets him do as he pleases. If it's unreasonable, then this king indulges him. If you're dissatisfied, then you can bring it up with this king. However, if anyone dares to lay a hand on Elevenor behind my back, then don't blame me for being impolite.' Feng Lianying watched as Nangongyu said this with dagger-like eyes as he glared at Feng Yunjing. Fury flashed in Feng Yunjing's eyes, and he coldly asked, 'Nangongyu, did you hit your head on something? For a guy with an unknown origin, you want to oppose my Feng family?' Following that, Feng Yunjing's gaze fell on Hushi while he grit his teeth, the voice leaving his mouth unexpectedly ruthless and irritable. 'In the end, what method did he use to seduce you? His outstanding face? Lascivious body? Or maybe it was that skillful little mouth? If it's a man or woman like him that you want, then the Feng family can find a few more for you. For trash like him, you dare to offend our Feng family and abuse the kindness we used to save your life. Is he really worth it? Nangongyu, it's better for you to give him to me to deal with. How does that sound? Believe me, with such an outcome, both the Feng family and Hell King Manor will be satisfied.' The coldness in Hushi's eyes suddenly intensified with his words, while rage surged in her chest to cause a strong murderous aura to overflow from her entire body. Chapter 306. Just a warning. This man had repeatedly humiliated her and made her angry to the point where she wished she could dismember his body. Due to her anger, her eyes shone bright like stars, while her lips were as delicate and exquisite as rose petals. Her skin was like sparkling and translucent jade flushed with a scarlet peach blossom color. Such world-shaking beauty was bound to stand out from the masses. Seeing the scene in front of him, Feng Yunjing became somewhat crazy, and an intense urge to monopolize him bloomed within his heart. This person, he wanted him. The purple abyss vine in Hushi's hand shook violently as if at any moment it would be unable to resist intervening. However, Nangongyu moved faster than her, and a long, black sword appeared in his hand, its sharp end pointing straight towards Feng Yunjing. Even though a gentle and noble smile hung on his face, the coldness in his eyes seemed to emphasize his feelings of wanting to tear the man before him to shreds. "Feng Yunjing, did you forget? Outside of the secret territory, you're not my match." He paused, and the curve at a corner of his mouth became more gentle but seemed to emit a bloodthirsty feeling that could make anyone's hair stand on end. "In this major cloud array, your cultivation base is worthless. If I wanted to take your life, it would be as easy as flipping my hand." That said, a blinding green ray of light burst from his body. Following this, his figure abruptly disappeared from where he'd stood. Blood refining body cultivator of the 4th rank. One of the disciples of the Liu Li sect couldn't help uttering a roar of horror. Wasn't Hell King a high-level spiritual cultivation martial artist? Why is he also a blood-refining body cultivator? No one with a dual soul cultivation base had appeared for over 1,000,000 years. In the end, to what extent was Hell King's true strength? Shock also emerged in Feng Yunjing's eyes, and he rapidly stepped backwards to summon all kinds of spiritual weapons to his hands. However, in comparison, Nangongyu's longsword was faster and more ruthless. The sword arrived at where Feng Yunjing was standing, and before he was able to transfer all his spiritual power to the spiritual weapons, they all fell to the ground with a clatter. Feng Yunjing's eyes finally revealed no small amount of shock. Just as he wanted to open his mouth to speak, a field of overwhelming power seemed to envelop him. This caused his expression to become deathly pale and his throat to be blocked, making him unable to utter a sound. If they were outside of the major cloud array, he didn't believe that he would lose to Nangongyu. Plus, coupled with all the spiritual weapon arrays left in the hands of the Feng family, it absolutely wouldn't be an easy task for Nangongyu to take advantage of him. But this major cloud array could absorb a person's spiritual power to the last drop, leave only a smidgen of spiritual power to remain in spiritual weapons, and reduce other types of weapons to scrap iron. He himself couldn't even display 1/10 of his usual strength. Feng Yunjing's complexion turned an unsightly shade before his gaze swept over to Hushi, who was standing nearby and watching. Shock and anger, plus a surge of fighting spirit, rose within his heart. He was unwilling to lose face in front of him. Seeing Nangongyu's powerful sword, Nai Jinchen, who had been foolishly watching all this time, suddenly sobered and shouted, "Nangongyu, have mercy." However, Nangongyu didn't seem to hear him. The sword suddenly thrust forward and severely pierced Feng Yunjing's left shoulder. Yet while it had missed his heart, it was still dangerously close to it. A deadly silence descended within the white fog. The sound of the sword piercing flesh still rung in their ears. Everyone was frightened by Hell King's horrible strength and ruthlessness, so for a moment, they all kept quiet out of fear. Nangongyu withdrew the black sword and coldly said, "This time was just a warning, but next time, you won't be so lucky." Chapter 307, Rare Treasure Big Brother. It was at this time that Feng Lianying finally returned to her senses and she rushed over to support Feng Yunjing, but her hatred-filled gaze locked onto Nangongyu. "Brother Yu, how could you be so heartless? For such a lowly person you even disregarded the kindness my Feng family has shown towards you." Shiying. Once again unsheathing the sword, it was then pointed straight at Feng Lianying. The gleaming cold tip of the sword was less than a centimeter away from her throat and had even managed to cut the delicate skin, resulting in a subtle amount of pain. A corner of Nangongyu's mouth raised and he slowly said, "If it were not because of the kindness the Feng family had shown me, you all would have died in this white fog long ago. Even your bones would no longer exist." Feng Lianying still wanted to say something more, but when her eyes met with Nangongyu's dark and piercing ones, her breath suddenly caught in her throat. With her face becoming pale, she was momentarily unable to utter a single word. All the disciples of the Liu Li sect rushed over, worried about the condition of Feng Yunjing's injury. Feng Yunjing pushed them all away, his fathomless black eyes examining the wound on his chest. But when he raised his head once again, his face held no trace of ruthlessness, only calmness. "Nangongyu, is that person really that important to you?" Nangongyu slowly walked back to stand beside Hushi, and reaching out his hand, he gently kneaded her small hand. It wasn't until Hushi had ignored him by flinging his hand away that he'd coldly looked at Feng Yunjing, and faintly said, "Elevenor is my treasure, a rare treasure that no one is allowed to covet or touch. What do you think, is he important or not?" Hushi couldn't help rub at the goosebumps that had raised on her arms when she heard that. When had this guy learned to speak so disgustingly? However, she didn't realize that a corner of her mouth had lifted into a shallow curve. Feng Yunjing's gaze swept over Hushi's face, his eyes burning with anger and envy that quickly disappeared. His face was still without any trace of emotion. "Good. I can promise to let him off, as well as ignore your relationship with him for the time being. But, you have to let him use his purple abyss vine to help us break the major cloud array." That said, Feng Yunjing looked towards Hushi and slowly said, "As long as you agree to help us break the major cloud array and enter the medicinal field, I promise that all disciples of my Liu Li sect will not make a move against you while we're in the sealed dragon domain. How about it?" Feng Lianying couldn't help but shriek, "Big brother, why should we let him off?" However, as Feng Yunjing's sharp eyes glanced at her, Feng Lianying felt her voice tremble and she no longer dared to speak. Hashi frowned as she mentally weighed the advantages and disadvantages of entering the medicinal field with these people. Just at this moment, Jiyu Liufeng, Qing Long, Wu Yu, and the others rushed towards them. Once they saw that Hashi wasn't hurt, Jiyu Liufeng immediately hurried forward and happily said, "Little Yua, it's good that you're all right." While saying that, his hand was reaching out to touch Hashi's shoulder. The next second, 4 piercingly cold eyes swept towards him, causing Jiyu Liufeng's hand to freeze mid-air. He didn't dare touch Hashi now. Nangong Yu pulled Hashi into his arms as he glared at Jiyu Liufeng in warning, before he then bowed his head towards Hashi and said, "You should agree. Inside the medicinal field, if there's anything that you want, I will help you to get it." Although Nangong Yu had confidence regarding his profound cultivation base, if the Liu Li sect really focused their attention on Hashi, then after they left the secret territory, Hashi would be in danger at every turn. Hashi was slightly startled, but she immediately realized the outcome of the situation if she refused. She turned to Feng Yunjing and indifferently said, "Okay, I can help you to break the major cloud array, but we'll be doing it my way." Feng Yunjing was surprised. "Your way?" Chapter 308, 100 Herb Mist Correct. Hashi laughed faintly. "No need to spend time finding the array's core again, because as long as we directly find all 64 parts of the array's eye inside the major cloud array and break them together within a short time, that will suffice." Surprise flashed within Feng Yunjing's eyes, but before he could speak, Nai Jinchen had already exclaimed, "Don't speak nonsense. With there being 64 parts of array's eye, how could we find and break them all in a short time?" Hashi sneered, and like a purple flame, the purple abyss vine in her hand soared, shooting away in all directions. Her voice was like ice crystals falling onto a jade plate, crisp and pleasant to listen to as she spoke with perfect confidence. "Just because you're incapable of doing it, it doesn't mean that I am too. I have already found the locations of all 64 parts of the array's eye. Now, all of you just need to follow the directions of these 64 purple vines to break the array's eye." Everyone present, including Jiyu Liufeng, Qing Long, and the rest, all had their eyes wide open in shock. As they looked at the beautiful youngster before them, it was like we're looking at an unbelievable monster. The white fog was a place where nobody was able to use spiritual power, and concealed within it were the 64 parts of the array's eye. By just controlling a 5th-rank devil plant, the purple abyss vine, all 64 parts were easily found. How formidable would a person's divine sense be to be able to do that? How strong would their mental power be? Before them was a youngster who was merely on the foundation establishment stage. In the end, just how did he accomplish it? Feng Yunjing's burning gaze focused on the youngster surrounded by purple vines. The light within his eyes was like a burning flame, expressing his strong desire and determination to possess him. Nangong Yu took note of Feng Yunjing's gaze, and his long eyelashes slightly lowered, covering the sharp gleam within his eyes. With the guidance of the purple abyss vine, all 64 parts of the array's eye in the major cloud array were very quickly broken, one by one. The moment when the last part of the array's eye was shattered, Hashi and the others felt an aggressive wind push against them. The white fog before them was swept away by something, and in a flash, it disappeared without a trace. Even the dampness in the air was suddenly restored to a more normal temperature. In the locations where all the parts of the array's eye had been, a bright light abruptly flashed, and a portal array appeared. Without a doubt, this was the portal door to the medicinal field, 100 Herbs Mist. Hashi had already informed everyone that after all 64 parts of the array's eye had been broken, the time frame for the major cloud array to be disabled would be short. They had to take this opportunity to enter the portal array, or else, the subsequent white fog would be more intense and horrible than before. Therefore, almost at the moment when the portal array had appeared, the people of Hell King Manor and the Liu Li sect had immediately stepped inside. For the martial artists who were trapped within the white fog, unable to leave, once they saw the Liu Li sect enter the portal array, they quickly followed and entered the portal array too. After the time it took to take a few breaths, the white fog reformed and covered the road ahead with a hazy dampness, causing the remaining people within the white fog to scream in fright and despair. However, This was something that Hashi and the others were unaware of, as they had already entered the medicinal field. As soon as she entered the medicinal field, Hashi's senses were assaulted with intense spiritual energy that was mixed with the pure fragrance of plants. Looking up slightly, her expression quickly changed into one of astonishment. The legendary treasure that countless martial artists had fought over, the medicinal field, 100 herb mist, was now before her. The medicinal field was really too large. Stretching out in all directions, it was almost impossible to see the edges. Divided into 4 squares, each square contained 1 or 2 types of herbs. Among these medicinal herbs, the lowest grade one was a matured 2nd grade spiritual plant. Chapter 309, Unlimited Craziness and Greed. The side of the medicinal field near where everyone stood, there were rare 4th grade and 5th grade spiritual plants. In regards to every herb, if just a single stalk was sold, the profit would easily be enough to support the entirety of a small sect. On top of that, many of the spiritual plants found here in 100 herb mist were uncommon. Hashi gazed into the distance and noticed that about a few hundred meters away, located approximately in the center of the medicinal field, there was a hill covered with green plants. The hill was approximately 4 to 5 meters in height, and neither looked special or majestic. Yet on the mountain, who knew what treasure was planted there, but it actually emitted a splendid multicolored light. While Hashi was studying the multicolored lights, she smelt the scent of a rich medicinal fragrance that was faintly emitted into the air. For a moment, she felt her blood race and itched to grab every treasure in the medicinal field, stuffing them all into her bag. However, such a burning desire lasted only a moment before she immediately became clear-headed and slightly frowned. This medicinal field, it seemed a bit odd. Whether it was because of the extremely expensive spiritual plants inside the medicinal field, or the intoxicating medicinal fragrance permeating the air, but the martial artists in the area seemed seriously out of sorts. Just then, from the side, there came the sound of everyone inhaling deep breaths before the sounds of exclamation and excitement reached Hashi's ears. Heavens! This is 100 herb mist. I'm not dreaming. I thought that I'd be trapped in the white fog forever and would die in there. I didn't expect to get in here. I'm so blessed that I must be going to die soon. Hurry up. Quickly take everything. These medicinal herbs belong to our Xianhe sect. When we bring these back with us, we'll make a fortune. Ha ha ha. Hashi turned her head and saw a group of people with their eyes blood red. It looked like they'd lost all reason. They were all staring at the medicinal field with fixed gazes, while their eyes were slowly becoming more bloodshot and glinted with unlimited craziness and greed. The next moment, it was unknown who, but someone suddenly shouted, "Quickly take everything." This group of people had actually lost their minds, and like crazy, they all rushed into the medicinal field. Amongst these people, the aloof 3rd prince, Shangguan Rui, and his bodyguards, were included. Shangguan Rui's cultivation base was usually not considered high, and almost all of his spiritual power had been drained away by the white fog. But at this very moment, he looked like he was being hit by a rush of stimulants as he immediately took the lead in rushing into the medicinal field. His hands that were pulling at the herbs were continually trembling, and his mouth kept muttering, "Jinling seed, Tian Yuan fruit. As long as I have these, I'll be able to advance to gold core stage. Jinling Kingdom's throne will be mine, ha ha ha." While this was happening, Shangguan Rui's 2 personal bodyguards who were expert gold core stage martial artists were also acting crazy as they rushed into the medicinal field, incessantly picking the herbs. The scene quickly turned into chaos as the martial artists advanced from crazily picking the herbs to irrationally fighting over them without restraint. Someone seized a Tian Yuan fruit and laughed loudly. "This time I'll be able to make a bunch of money. However, this is a Tian Yuan fruit. 1,000-year-old Tian Yuan fruit. If you consume just one, you can extend your life by 100 years, ha ha ha." However, his laughter quickly cut off with a grunt. Blood sprayed from his throat, and his body fell powerlessly to the ground, while the Tian Yuan fruit in his hand was quickly snatched away. The medicinal field was filled with people, and they were obviously high-level martial artists. Yet at this moment, it was like a fight in the markets as they completely ignored their images. In order for their newly plucked herbs to stay within their grasps, some people began to stuff the herbs into their mouths. The high-level spiritual plants were covered with mud and blood, and as they were swallowed, it seemed to make those that ate them become more excitable and crazy. Another guard was finally unable to endure it any longer, and he said a bit urgently. Hashi, however, still shook her head. We'll wait to see if any changes occur first. That guard couldn't help but to shift his eyes and look at Nangong Yu. Seeing that Nangong Yu had no intentions to refute Hashi whatsoever, his face revealed a somewhat irritable look. Hashi had barely finished speaking when Feng Yunjing heard Feng Lianying contemptuously say, "It's just a mere mind confusion, yet you're scared and want to withdraw first." She then gently looked at Nangong Yu and said, "Brother Yu, I have assembling soul fragrance that was given to me by my master. It's the nemesis of mind confusion. In a moment, I'll light the assembling soul fragrance, and you guys can immediately go pick the herbs. I promise you won't lose your minds." Then, a small finger-length stick of red incense appeared in her hand. With her white dress fluttering in the breeze and a pale pink silk veil covering her face, the contrast with her beautiful eyes was stunning. At this moment, the incense was lit, and a light smoke rose in spirals to curl around everyone, quickly clearing the minds of those who had lost all reason. Chapter 311, The Safest Place? Everyone now had a relaxed expression on their face, and they were looking at Feng Lianying with gazes of admiration and gratefulness. All the martial artists in the medicinal field who had been killing each other and devouring the medicinal herbs gradually began to sober, each of them revealing a horrified and confused expression. Abruptly, there were sudden exclamations from the people that had sobered, so it was all thanks to Liu Li Sect's Ice Lotus Fairy. It's no wonder that she had such methods to easily dispel the mind confusion. Ice Lotus Fairy is indeed a person with a virtuous heart like in the legend. Everyone in the medicinal field can escape calamity today thanks to the help of such a fairy. The praises coming from all the people made a haughty and arrogant expression appear on Feng Lianying's face. But when she looked at Nangong Yu, her eyes became gentle and watery. It's just a minor accomplishment, nothing worth mentioning. To be able to help everyone is Lianying's privilege. Brother Yu, quickly go pick the spiritual plants in the medicinal field. Many of spiritual plants here are rare, so maybe even your illness will be able to benefit greatly. For the martial artists who had now become cleared-headed and were waiting outside the medicinal field, once they heard her words, some of them couldn't endure any longer, and they rushed back into the medicinal field. This act caused the anxiety of Hell King Manner's bodyguards to increase. Even Wu Yu was eager to move forward and pick herbs in the medicinal field. However, Hashi held out a hand to stop them. "Hold on. This medicinal field is rather complicated, you shouldn't act rashly." Feng Lianying mockingly laughed at Hashi. "Isn't young master she too cautious? 100 Herb Mist is in Greenwood Realm, however, it was personally created and planted by Zijin's master. The white fog surrounding the medicinal field, and the spiritual energy being emitted from the herbs, is all there to ward off the spiritual beasts and people who come after it and want to ruin it. Therefore, this medicinal field could even be said to be the safest place in the sealed dragon domain. As for that mind confusion," Feng Lianying shook her head in disdain, then sneeringly said, "Young master, she is too ignorant and inexperienced, so, therefore, you might not understand. There are 2 types of herbs in the medicinal field, and once they mature, their fragrances will mix to create mind confusion and confuse a person's mind. But this kind of mind confusion is only effective on martial artists that are of gold core stage and below, and those who are mentally weak. It's not intentionally targeting us. I didn't expect that just a mere mind confusion scent would actually frighten young master Shi." Hihi, at this moment, Nai Jinchen walked forward to stand beside Feng Lianying and followed up her remarks by snidely saying, "Little sister Lianling, he's only a low-level martial artist who comes from a small place, it's only natural that he hasn't seen the world yet. There's no need for you to lower yourself for such a person." After that, he looked up at Nangong Yu. "Nangong, It's unlikely that you'll believe that kid over Lian Ying's judgment, right? Don't forget, she's a 6th-rank doctor. Nangong Yu slightly narrowed his eyes. There was cold malice contained within his eyes, and yet the expression on his face was indifferent as he smiled lightly and said, I came to this medicinal field for Eleanor's sake. Since Eleanor said that it was unnecessary to pick them, it's fine if I don't touch any of these herbs. Then, his cold gaze swept over the bodyguards around him. Whatever young master she says goes. If anyone dares question it, you better get lost from the major cloud array. As soon as he finished speaking, the bodyguards of Hell King Manor immediately shut their mouths in fear. While Feng Lian Ying, on the other hand, was seething with anger. Nai Jinchen saw that her face was purple with rage, and he couldn't help but feel distressed. Clenching his teeth, he said, Little sister Lian Ying, you don't have to bother about this group of cowards. I'll go now and collect the Chen Xiong fruit that you want. After saying that, he ruthlessly glared at Hushi, before he then turned around and walked towards the center of the medicinal field. Chapter 312, Purgatory on Earth. Soon, Nai Jinchen had picked a 5th-grade spiritual plant, a Chen Xiong fruit. While walking back, he aimed a provocative grin towards Hushi and the others. However, before Nai Jinchen could leave the medicinal field, he suddenly heard a shrill scream coming from behind him. Nai Jinchen instinctively turned his head around and saw the shadows of 2 people emerge from the depths of the medicinal field. Specifically, the hill which was exuding the colorful rays of light. When the 2 people neared Nai Jinchen, and he could clearly see their appearances, he immediately released a cry of, "Ah!" It was unknown when, but the faces of the pair had been covered with blood blisters. The largest of the blood blisters were the size of grapes, while the smallest ones were the size of a woman's pinky nail. The blood blisters were squished together, some were purple, while some were dark red. Because they were so densely packed together on her face, it made a person want to vomit at first glance. Their eyes were bloodshot, and as they ran, their hands uncontrollably scratched at their faces. This caused the blisters to pop and their faces to look like they were melting as filthy pus and watery blood streaked down their cheeks. Save me. One of them reached out his hand towards Nai Jinchen, his eyes full of pleading and fear. That hand trembled violently, and the fingertips were covered with a mix of red and white pus. In just a moment, it was about to grab onto Nai Jinchen's clothes. Nai Jinchen suddenly returned to his senses, and reacting like he'd seen a ghost, he shouted loudly and flew out of the medicinal field like a madman. The 2 people were unable to catch Nai Jinchen, so with hesitation, they changed direction and staggered towards the crowds. While they ran, they uttered wretched screams of, "Save me dash! Save me dash! I don't want to die!" All of the people standing outside the medicinal field were stunned when they saw this scene, their faces showing alarm. However, the horror was far from finished. Those who had sobered within the medicinal field because of the assembling soul fragrance abruptly fainted without warning. While the martial artists who'd devoured the spiritual plants whole found ugly red patches developing on their faces at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. These red patches quickly spread to cover their entire body, and there was a tendency for them to swell into blood blisters. The martial artists who had red patches spreading across their bodies continually twitched, and even though they were all in a coma, they still uttered pained groans. Their faces were contorted into expressions of agony. In the blink of an eye, the medicinal field that had just a moment ago been covered in martial artists rushing about like headless chickens, had now become a scene of purgatory on earth. Nai Jinchen stared at the scene before him in horror. His face was pale, and absolute dread made his body slightly tremble. Suddenly, he came to his senses and threw away the jade box in his hand that had contained the Chen Xiong fruit like a frightened deer, his expression terrified. Jiyu Liufeng laughed and said, "I wonder who it was that just said that this medicinal field was definitely not dangerous and that our little Yua had never seen the world. In the end, who is that hasn't yet seen the world?" His gaze landed on Nai Jinchen's hands. Clicking his tongue, he gloated as he said, "You just touched the herb directly with your hand. You might have been infected. When the time comes for you to also have the appearance of a zombie, TSK, it's a pity about your face, Nai Jinchen was so frightened that he staggered backwards and knocked into Feng Lianying, who had just walked over. Feng Lianying covered her sore nose that had bumped into him, and stared at the hellish scene of anguished wailing coming from the medicinal field, her face turning pale. Just a moment ago she'd almost followed them into the medicinal field. If she'd been infected and had her appearance become so terrifying. Just thinking of the consequences made Feng Lianying's body become cold and her breathing to become heavy. Chapter 313. Intuition. Jiyu Liufeng moved closer to Hashi, and smiled lazily as he said, "Little Yua, you'd long ago seen the problem with these spiritual herbs." Hashi's expression was indifferent as she slowly nodded. However, all the bodyguards from Hell King Manor suddenly returned to their senses, and despite the fear they were all feeling, they were looking at Hashi with expressions full of gratefulness. Just now, if it weren't for their princess stopping them, they could very well have ended up with a horrific appearance too. It was no wonder that Master doted so much on Princess and was so trusting in regards to her medical skill. There were so many high-level martial artists here, and even a 5th-rank doctor, but Princess was the only person who saw through the strangeness of this medicinal field. "How did you know that there was a problem with the spiritual herbs?" a cold voice suddenly asked, interrupting everyone's arguing. It was unknown when Feng Yunjing had moved to Hush's side, but he was now leaning his head towards her with his eyes burning as he waited for her answer. Hushi glanced at him before indifferently answering, "Intuition." This perfunctory answer caused Feng Yunjing's face to frown in anger. He hadn't expected that even though he'd discarded his honor to ask, Hushi would dare not to give him any face. But, in fact, Hushi didn't actually lie. When it came to the spiritual herbs within this medicinal field, whether it was color, shape, scent, or spiritual power fluctuations, they all were exactly the same as real herbs. She couldn't accurately pinpoint what was wrong with the herbs, but her doctor's natural instinct made her feel naturally sensitive towards poisonous substances. This was also coupled with Dandan's warning from her space in the beginning. "Mother, there are dangerous things here. Be careful." Therefore, she could be sure that there must be a problem with this medicinal field. The Liu Li sect's disciples who'd followed behind Feng Yunjing couldn't bear to see their young master being ignored in such a way, and couldn't help but scorn, so as it turns out it wasn't because of genuine talent, but only blind luck. A fan suddenly appeared in Wu Yu's hand, and while fanning himself, he laughingly said, "I'm afraid that some people here don't even have blind luck, and yet they still think that they're amazing." Jiyu Liufeng promptly joined in, and laughed as he said, "Exactly. And who was it that said that intuition is not a type of strength? Perhaps some of the people who are a part of a certain sect will not have the strength to bluff well enough." They both played off each other and ridiculed the Liu Li sect and Feng Lianying. When the disciples of Liu Li sect heard such mocking words, they were filled with indignation. Nai Jinchen was even more incensed and started cursing, "Jiyu Liufeng, don't fucking pretend to know what's best. Do any of you have the qualifications to slander little sister Lian Ying and the Liu Li sect? Do you think that I won't kill you?" Wu Yu waved the fan as he chuckled, "Oh, so you're going to kill people to silence them? I'm so scared. I wonder who it was that was just in the major cloud array asking my master not to kill them." Since eating Hashi's delicious food, Wu Yu had firmly established the principle of unwaveringly holding the princess's words on a high pedestal. If Princess were to ever argue with his master, he would undoubtedly support Princess to the end. "Yeah, everything is worth it for food." Jiyu Liufeng saw Feng Lianying's extremely unsightly face, and sneered, "Which one our words were slanderous? Wasn't it because of your Liu Li sect's ice lotus fairy that more people lost consciousness?" At that time, many martial artists had entered the medicinal field and fallen unconscious because of Feng Lianying's assembling soul fragrance. Feng Yunjing glanced at Wu Yu, then looked at Nangong Yu, a corner of his mouth rising slightly. How come I was unaware that the servants from Hell King Manor could be so uncontrolled? Chapter 314, Ice Lotus Fairy, Save Me. Nangong Yu's expression was indifferent, and he carelessly said, "He's new and still doesn't understand the rules." Yunjing, you don't have to bother about him. At this moment, Wu Yu was disguised as an ordinary bodyguard, but where was there a bodyguard who had enough guts to provoke the Feng family? This, together with Nangong Yu's cold attitude, Feng Yunjing clearly understood that he was being lied to. Wu Yu wanted to say something more, but Qing Long stepped forward and lightly pressed his hand down on Wu Yu's shoulder, shaking his head at him. Now was not the time to cause trouble with the Liu Li sect. Otherwise, all of their master's previous work would be ruined. Wu Yu curled his lip as he closed his mouth and didn't say anything further. At this moment, the two men who had appeared with blood blisters and pus dripping down their bodies started crawling away from the medicinal field. As soon as they saw Feng Lianying, their eyes lit up, and they staggered towards her. Wherever they went, the other martial artists avoided them as if they were poisonous snakes. Feng Lianying also wanted to run away, but because of her fear, her feet failed to move. Ice Lotus Fairy, save us! Wretched shouts resounded throughout the medicinal field. The two men plopped to the ground to kneel in front of Feng Lianying, hissing in pain as they yelled, "I'm the master of the Murong family, Murong Zhongfeng. My Murong family has always been on peaceful terms with the Liu Li sect. I beg you, please save us." As soon as the words left his mouth, everyone couldn't help but be surprised. These two people covered in blood blisters who couldn't be recognized unexpectedly turned out to be the master of the Murong family, Murong Zhongfeng, someone from one of the four major families of Yangjing City. The other was Murong Zhongfeng's father, the elder of Murong Manor, Murong Hai, Yangjing City's famous third-rank doctor. These two people suddenly threw themselves before Feng Lianying, their fingers stretching to touch her delicate hand. Their pus and blood-covered hands already clutching her snow-white clothes. Feng Lianying was so terrified that her complexion lost all color, turning a sickly pale as she stepped back several paces. Her eyes were full of horror and disgust. Feng Yunjing, who was watching from the side, frowned when he heard the two people reveal their identities, and asked, "How did you end up like this?" Seeing that the person questioning them was the young master of the Feng family, Feng Yunjing, how could they dare to delay answering? Enduring the acute pain racking their bodies and the fear in their hearts, they quickly told the whole story. It turned out that the Murong family had been the first people to enter the medicinal field through the major cloud array. When they had first entered the medicinal field, they'd also discovered that there was the scent of mind confusion in the air that could cause a person to lose their mind. However, the Murong family had Murong Hai with them, a third-rank doctor. Therefore, they were naturally unafraid of such a trifling poison. As soon as the mind confusion scent had been removed, they began to collect the herbs within the field. There were countless fifth-grade spiritual plants within the medicinal field. And later, when someone noticed the hill that was glowing with colorful rays of light, they found sixth-grade spiritual plants that could make one go insane with greed. But just as the Murong family were ecstatic, people from their group began to faint and become feverish. No matter how much Murong Hai examined them, he couldn't discover why they'd fallen unconscious. What's worse, was that the red rash began to spread on the faces of the unconscious people. The red rash grew at a speed that was visible to the naked eye before they then turned into giant blood blisters. These blood blisters growing on their bodies were extremely itchy. So itchy, that even people with sharp minds couldn't help but scratch. Unfortunately, even if you didn't scratch at them, after a while, the blisters would still pop and turn into a horribly bloody mess. Once the blood blisters began to burst, the person's skin and internal organs would start rotting until they died. Chapter 315, Distraught Jiyu Liufeng recalling the experiences of the past half an hour, Murong Zhongfeng's eyes were full of fear and despair. He didn't dare look at his own hands and feet, and he avoided even thinking about what his face looked like. He could only place all his hopes on Ice Lotus Fairy. Everyone knew that Ice Lotus Fairy was an intermediate member of the Doctors Association, and that she was also one of the best fifth-rank doctors found on Mi Luo continent. We of the Murong family entered the medicinal field with 29 people, but now, there are only 2 of us who are still alive. The others are all dead, they're all dead, we don't want to die. Young Master Feng, Please let Ice Lotus Fairy save us. Your Feng family's great kindness, our Murong family will certainly repay back 100-fold in the future. Of the 29 people, only 2 had survived. Fear was visible on everyone's face. Did that mean that all those unconscious martial artists in the medicinal field will die too? Hashi and the others had initially been observing the development of things quietly, but then the Murong family had said that. Jiyu Liufeng's body suddenly started trembling before he then stormed forward without warning, and fiercely glared at Murong Zhongfeng. You just said that everyone else is dead. Then what about Jiyu Yidao? Didn't he come in with you? Murong Zhongfeng looked at him, and his eyes flashed, his expression quickly morphing into one of loss as he wailed, dead, he's dead. Jiyu Liufeng's lips slightly parted as his eyes filled with shock and horror. He stood blankly, his lifeless expression changing into one of hatred as he looked down at Murong Zhongfeng. A raging flame burned in his eyes as if he was ready to mutilate him. Abruptly, he turned around and rushed towards the medicinal field. Fortunately, Wu Yu's hands moved faster, and he rushed over and grabbed him. Are you crazy? Don't you see what they look like once they enter the field? Aren't you afraid that you'll become like them too? Don't you want to live anymore? Don't bother about me. Jiyu Liufeng roared like a trapped beast, his body violently struggling. I have to save him. Whether I live or die has nothing to do with you. Jiyu Liufeng was a peak gold core stage martial artist, so in regards to his power, he was still higher than Wu Yu. How would Wu Yu be able to stop him? So, letting go, he watched as Jiyu Liufeng recklessly charged towards the medicinal field. Seeing that Jiyu Liufeng had lost his mind, Hashi frowned. Although she had only known Jiyu Liufeng for a short time, he had always been calm, graceful, and relaxed. She had never seen such a distraught Jiyu Liufeng before. It seemed that this Jiyu Yidao was extremely important to him. Hashi pulled on Nangongyu's sleeve, whispered a few words in his ear, and then slipped him a small bottle of medicine. A corner of Nangongyu's mouth twitched, reluctance written all over his face. Elevenor, you're so concerned about that kid, yet I haven't seen you be that good to me. Seeing Hashi glaring at him, he could only ignore his jealousy. Leaning close to Hashi's ear, he softly whispered, I can listen to your words and help him. However, you have to reward me later, Elevenor. Without waiting for Hashi to respond, his figure had already disappeared. While Jiyu Liufeng, who had just reached the edge of the medicinal field, suddenly felt pressure like Mount Tai pressing down on him. Just as he was about to fight against it, Nangongyu suddenly reached out and poured the medicine from the bottle into Jiyu Liufeng's slightly parted mouth. Spiritual energy began to swiftly fill the air, and the medicine instantly spread throughout his body. Jiyu Liufeng felt his eyes blurring before he then lost consciousness. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.